These things are just loud. But she's starting her, she's in a sorority.
Oh.
She's a sophomore, so she's, instead of rushing this sorority, now she has to prepare to be part of people.
Tom, do you want to just say testing yours?
Hello? Much better.
Test, test.
It's like they're all in.
Could you be specific?
Testing.
So she was down at the U all day today, and I think we'll be all week, and then I moved Paige back to Madison last weekend and stuff. So.
And then do you have one that's still in high school?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, the oldest is,
She's done with school?
she's a super senior.
Oh, so you got three again.
Yeah, they're all, she's in Nebraska and then Madison and Minnesota. This still feels really loud.
Do you feel it's better?
It is, but I still, like,
What did he tell us? He told us when it sounds like that or something.
I took notes. Let me see if I can find them.
I think they've got the control in there.
all right, I am.
It's Tom.
Program volume on right side.
Today?
It's not, I don't know what clock we're going by.
Well, mine says 5:30.
You have the official time on your phone?
I do.
Why don't we wait and see if the mayor's coming? Maybe he gets a couple minutes. I didn't talk to the mayor today. Did you talk to him at all?
Once.
Okay.
Thought he was gonna be. Now it's right there. Got it.
When did it show up, do you know?
I started having about 4 months ago.
No, I mean tonight.
Just now.
Like when I walked in?
No. Yep.
It's interesting, I have Bluetooth. Well, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, maybe you ought to kick us off. It's 5:30 plus.
Microphones are on.
Good evening, everyone. This is the City of Victoria budget workshop is what we're having this evening for the next approximately 1 hour. And it will be an informal meeting. Mayor Funk isn't with us yet, so we will start off and make sure we cover all the material. So I'm going to hand the meeting over to Kelly Grinnell. And Kelly, why don't you lead us through your presentations?
All right. Thank you, council members. So the budget process for the city begins in June each year and ends in December. So there are a number of steps we go through in order to get to a final budget. And tonight, we're just going to be talking about the general fund budget. So beginning in June, we asked the department heads to submit their budget requests. Then in July, the Finance Committee will review a first draft of that budget and then also the proposed property tax levy. August, which is where we are tonight, is the first budget workshop with the council. In September, we need to certify a preliminary levy and budget. The deadline for that is the end of the month, so I believe it's the September 10th meeting is when we will actually be doing that work. if, in October and November, the staff will continue to work on the budget. We have a lot of good numbers, but we don't have all of the numbers yet. In particular, our health insurance numbers do not come in until October. And then the Finance Committee will also continue to look at that budget. In November, we'll have our second council budget workshop. And then finally, in December, we will adopt the final levy and budget. So I always like to start out with the good news, because believe it or not, there are some numbers that actually decrease from year to year. So our administration contractual services number is down by almost 26,000, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is a $20,000 reduction in the Southwest Prime ride-sharing service. You may remember that we budgeted $40,000 for that service this year, and it's a new service, so we weren't really sure what the demand was going to be. The $40,000 number came from Southwest based on their estimates, and so far we're averaging quite a bit less for that.
Kelly, do you want to touch on, do you want any discussion on these items as you hit them, or do you want to wait until you've kind of made your introductory remarks? How do you want to?
Might be easiest for you guys just to jump in as we're talking about something, so.
So, rather than just averages, I like trend lines. So what does ridership trend line look like for the Southwest Metro Prime? In other words, if we cap it at something that looks like this year's expense, and the line is going up, are we going to fall short next year?
Right. We're averaging probably 60 to 70 riders per month, which comes out to $600 to $700 a month. And it trickled up a little bit, I'd say through May. It's been down a little bit in the summer months, and I think that might be due to vacations and other things going on. So say it's $700 a month in the course of a full year, it'd be $8,400. So we still have a lot of wiggle room to get to that $20,000 mark.
Okay.
So
Thank
we'll
you.
continue to monitor that, and next year, if it's trending higher, we would adjust the budget for that.
And there may be also some upside, or in this case, downside potential of if we get a little further on in the budget process and that number isn't changing, maybe we can pull another 5 out or something.
Right.
Maybe.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
The other reduction in that category is coming from the citizen survey. We did a citizen survey in 2018, and we won't do another one for probably 2 or 3 years. So that amounted to $15,000 decrease. 2019 is an odd year, so there aren't any elections. So the decrease from that category is over $17,000. And then also our planning contractual services line item is down. And this is due to the comprehensive plan. We're finishing that up in 2018. I believe it won't be formally adopted until 2019, but the bulk of the work has been done for that particular project. And then finally, the last item that's going down significantly is our building inspections department employee benefits. Last year, we budgeted that all of the employees would be opting for family health insurance, and we've since had some people opt out and take the cash in lieu of benefits option, so that saves us quite a bit. So then there, of course, are items that did increase. The sheriff's contract is up about $41,000. And part of that has to do with what we had in assigned fund balance from the end of 2017. We budgeted for a sheriff's deputy to be added in July of 2017, and they didn't start until a couple months later. So we had $16,000 that we set aside in assigned fund balance, and that allowed us to reduce the operating budget for 2018. So we're kind of having to make up that $16,000 in the 2019 budget, plus the other cost of living expenses for the sheriff's contract.
So what is that percentage increase approximately?
I've budgeted 5%. We haven't gotten a final number from the sheriffs yet, I don't believe. Have Have you seen anything from them? That should be coming in the next
I have
month or
not.
so. The other increase that's being proposed is an increase in the fire department duty crew program. This would add almost $10,000. Right now, they staff the fire department with a duty crew on Friday night. And what that does is it allows, in the case of a call that doesn't require the entire department to be paged out, there's maybe 3 people that can respond. And the hope is that it will save on our on-call hourly cost. So we still don't have a lot of information on it. Chief Hager has said it has been successful so far. So what they'll do is they'll look at their average over the last couple of years and see what other night is busy for us. So as it was before, Friday night was their busiest night. So then they'll look and see what's our next busiest night, and that's when they'll staff their next duty crew. Another item that's gone up quite a bit is our workers' comp insurance. And this has to do with a few things. The amount we pay for our volunteer firefighters is based on population. So since we've had a pretty big jump over the last few years, that one's gone up. And then also with the new positions we've added and salary increases, that's just naturally crept up some.
Have there been any claims?
No, the increase is not due at all to claims. Those have been fairly insignificant. So it's strictly due to the population position and rate increases.
Do we have an active program to monitor claims and do any training and or other kind of education as needed to kind of help minimize claims?
We do have a safety program that all of the employees participate in, and a lot of that is geared towards working safely. And then we have a reward system that we've been implementing for probably 4 or 5 years. So with that, every quarter that we make it through without any lost time incidents, we'll do a safety lunch. And then the fire department has a similar thing, except they do an annual dinner if they make it through the year. And then one of the big things that all the employees really like is if we make it through a whole year without a safety incident, we get 4 additional hours of PTO. So, and I believe we've made it quite a few years in a row now without a lost time.
Yeah, we just had that luncheon like a month or something ago, right? And
Yep.
we're at this year with no injuries that were time loss.
Well, congratulations, that's great. Just for the budget, but for the employees
Yeah.
who are.
The other thing that's up in the budget is the transfer to the new Parks and Trails Fund. You may remember that last year we established this new fund, and the intent is to be able to have money available for some of the parks and trails items that come up, and we typically haven't had a funding source. This fund is meant to be able to provide that funding source, and the goal was to increase this by $50,000 each year. So the amount for 2019 would be $150,000. It was $100,000 for this year. And then finally, staff is proposing an increase in the transfer to the long-term street maintenance fund of $100,000. This is a fund we set up maybe 6 or 7 years ago for the street overlays that we have coming up. And so this additional $100,000 would help us to set aside enough for those projected overlays.
Is there something specific related to it, or what triggered the need for the feeling that we needed to put some more?
Just looking at the projections for that fund, and Kara and her staff recently updated the overlay fund. So in looking at what we need, we won't have another one, I think, until 2020. But we also have a lot of them that are going to be coming due in 2022, 2023. So we just want to make sure we have enough set aside in that fund.
What's the balance in that fund at the present?
I believe it's about 1.5 million.
1.5. What is it average? I mean,
It's been going up each year, so And some of the overlays we have projected could be a $600,000 overlay, so that might sound like a lot, but some of those overlays are pretty expensive.
Hello. So you have the pleasure of having a large majority of the city aging at the same time. So we had a lot of growth 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. So what's going to happen is all the roads are going to come due for a routine overlay in the same 10-year window. So quite some time ago, we identified that that was going to be problematic if you needed to fund it just out of the annual tax base. So I think that was even before you were the finance director. The city set up this long-term street maintenance fund to be able to follow through on the commitment that was made to all the neighbors who were assessed for street reconstruction projects, so that come year 20, we do have the funding available to complete a mill and overlay without having to go back and assess people again for a road that they
We
paid for.
increased the transfer 100,000, so what is the total transfer for the year budgeted?
It's 142,000. The 42,000 part of it represents the amount we're gonna use for our, seal coating. So.
Okay, so how much was it last year?
Last year it was just 42,000. We
Okay,
didn't
so
put,
we're going from 42 to 142.
correct.
Historically, wasn't it 150 a year always?
You know, it fluctuated, and then each year, at the end of the year when we know if we've, have extra revenue or we've spent less than we budgeted, we'll typically transfer to that fund. So I think in most years, we've made a transfer to that fund. But as far as what was actually budgeted, that's varied, and some years it's been nothing, so.
Are we projecting that our transfer next year would have to be more, or did we not, I mean, 2020, or not?
Just give me a second to pull out that
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
spreadsheet.
Care of those overlays, those are just a set timetable? You don't evaluate the roads, or is it just?
So from a planning perspective, we set it based on 20 years, but in terms of what we'll actually do in what year would be dependent on the pavement condition itself. So what we're seeing with our roads is that I'm hoping that we can stretch that 20 years out a little bit further, maybe more that 20 to 25 year range instead of having to hit them all in year 20. We also want to try to kind of distribute that. So from a financial perspective, so you aren't getting hit with a whole bunch at once.
Are they often generated from complaints? You do an overlay because you're getting complaints?
No, we evaluate the pavement and
We have a-
program them based on pavement condition.
We have a pavement management plan, which we go around every so often to,
So we haven't had to go down the path of doing the formal rating system that you'll see in some larger cities because we
Yeah, that's what-
have few enough streets of general age and condition that we haven't had to expend those funds to do that rating. That might be something that the city would need to take on in some years down the road to try to start to program them. But generally, the life expectancy is that 20-year window of the pavement, and you want to make sure that you're maintaining it before it falls apart. So this would just be a simple mill, like we did in the Wintergreen neighborhood a couple of years ago,
So
where
you
we
grind, what, 2 inches?
1.5 2 inches, fix curb that might be settled, do any patching that might need to happen, but then put a new surface down.
This is at a 20-year interval.
Correct.
So then, how much more life does this give the road?
Another 20.
Another 20, so
Yeah.
40, you do a full,
Then you're probably into a reclaim type project like we're doing in the neighborhoods we did this year where
have we
you're
had any of our
removing all the
streets
pavement.
last 40 years?
Um,
Kind of-
no, so all
It's
of,
all-
Not yet.
When did the
Not yet.
standards
Correct.
that were built?
Okay, the old streets were built at a lower standard?
correct.
When did the current standards go?
It
in?
would have been in the late 90s was when the city started to switch over to having a sand section underneath the roadway, and that's pretty consistent across the metro area.
I think Deer Run was the last non-conforming, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
With the
that's
old engineering standards?
correct.
Correct. So, I know my house was built in 97, so I'm assuming somewhere shortly thereafter
Yeah.
was when,
I started with the city in 2001, and by then, we were fully building the new standard with the 2-foot sand section. So, and the intent of that standard is to have a 50-year road, provided that you keep up with the maintenance and the overlays.
How often do you do the seal coating?
Every 7 years. So we'll typically do it twice in a cycle before we have to do the,
you've provided in the
Overlay.
past a very nice graphic, kind of a chart of timeline and services and how that
yep,
relates to overall road life. That's probably something that's worth just, not as necessarily a budget item, but
yeah, certainly.
informational to distribute.
And hopefully this winter, we'll be able to carve out some time to start looking at whether we can spread that out further. So we'll do I'm watching the streets that are needing to be overlaid periodically now to see if we think we can get more life out of them, would be the goal.
I'm living on a street that doesn't look like it has the new engineering standards. So
Yours has sand, I think. I think Deer Run 14th edition was the first one to get sand underneath it. The first.
doesn't look good.
Good to know. And that was the wear course went down like right when I was hired. So you're around the corner for year 20.
It was the only part of Deer Run that didn't get the reclaim.
Correct.
A few years ago, right?
Yep. Yeah. I'll take a look at it though. I'm hijacking all of Kelly's time. I better sit down before
Thanks,
I keep
Carol.
talking about paving.
All right, so the question had been asked about what we had put into the long-term street maintenance fund and what's budgeted in the future for that fund. So in 2015, we contributed 157,000. Some of that budgeted, some of the year-end. Same thing for 2016, it was 275,000. We didn't make any transfer in 2017. For 2018, we have the 42,000, 142,000 for 2019. And then starting in 2020, it's going up to 335,000. And then it fluctuates from year to year, but it ultimately starts to increase to 750,000 in 2025.
So that's a little counterintuitive, I think, because we had all the reconstructions and the bigger projects, and then we're all on. And those are they wrapped up now, or do we have one more season?
We've got a few miscellaneous streets that need to be reconstructed, but there's no time frame for doing them, and they total about 800,000 total, so they're not large areas to do.
So now we're into the new standard. We're seal coating on a $50,000 a year kind of a rate, something along those lines. So what's behind the large, the 335 and then upward from there?
Just because we're going to have maybe 10, 12 streets that hit in 1 year. So just because so many, yeah. We had a lot of houses that were built in 2005, 2006. So there's just a lot that are going to come due in that probably 3 to 4 year time frame.
So I think we intentionally cut back this reserve provision for budgetary reasons in 2015, 16, or 17.
2017, we didn't.
Because we needed the funds elsewhere,
Correct.
and we thought we could do it prudently. So now we're back to where we're sticking in, we're transferring.
Yep, systematically adding to it so that when it comes time to
Okay.
do it, we'll have the money and we won't have to issue bonds.
Sorry for the momentary.
No, that's fine. I didn't think I would be able to talk for a full hour, so this is good.
At this rate, we're
You'll
to
be talking fast.
So I mentioned a little bit about that unfunded Parks and Trails Fund that was started in 2018. And the reason for that was last year we identified over $30 million in unfunded park and trail capital projects. About $14 million of that would relate to the pool and the enclosure of that pool. So if you take the pool out of the equation, it's about $16 million. And that's just in a variety of different park and trail projects. And then I mentioned the increase of the transfer by 50,000 each year. What's kind of neat to see is how much we can actually accumulate in a relatively short time frame. After 5 years, there would be $1 million in that fund if it's not spent. And then after 10 years, there would be over 3.2 million in that fund. So then there's also some new items that come up each budget year. So the first one is, it's new, but it's not. We budget to add an additional public works worker every other year. So we have one budgeted to start in April of 2019. And then we have a fuel card reader and the replacing Katy Hills Park playground.
So sorry, before we move on, I did have a question. What is the budgeted average pay increase for staff for 2019?
We've kind of continued this for the last couple of years. We project a 3% increase for employees that are above the midpoint in their salary range. And then anybody that is below the midpoint would get a 4% increase, and that's a general rule. So merit would also come into play. So, but generally 3 to 4%. Well, what I'm saying is if, say we didn't think somebody should get a 3 or 4% raise, they might get a lower raise. So.
Okay. And then what about legal? I'm interested in what our expenses have been for K&G for this year, and then what that trend line looks like, and then also obviously we are done with OML, so what are we, that money that was spent this year that won't be spent next year, kind of where does that go?
Well, and then added to that, then the prospect of the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust wanting to review things with us and what that potentially could mean if they change our deductible or add a deductible.
And did I see the premium notice from LMC?
No, I don't think so.
There were payments in the, I don't know,
I
premiums, there were payments in the latest.
Yeah, and
I don't think we've seen the premium for next year.
Yeah, our premium year runs from May 31st of each year to the following year. So you probably saw the quarterly payments in the claims roster.
18,000 something,
Yeah.
exactly.
So we've got a workers' comp payment we make every 6 months, and then our regular insurance we pay quarterly. So
Okay.
probably one of those two.
Do we need any kind of contingency based on their statements to, well, I guess we're not done with the budget process yet, so as we go through the next month or so, or two, may need some contingency money there if they change our rate structure and or put some money aside for a deductible if that becomes a,
Yeah, and we could, we would have insurance for at least 5 months out of the year. It'd actually be close to 6 months because it's May 31st. Well, that'd be 5 months. But we could look at adding some kind of contingency into the budget, or we could wait and see how the workshop goes. And the problem being, we can't increase the levy after we certify a preliminary levy. So we'd need to know by the end of September if we want to factor that in. Otherwise, we typically have some surplus at the end of the year, and we could look at setting some of that aside in assigned fund balance also.
Doug, do we know from our schedule with the LMC when we'll have some sort of a verdict, if you will, from them about what their plan is and any potential rate impact?
Well, we're not going to meet with them till, the workshop is on the 24th of September. So you certainly won't know anything until, I would think, then after that time, they would probably meet with their board if they think they need to. So you're into October, so I would guess we're not going to know until sometime in later October at best. which is after the
Right.
preliminary budget's approved in September.
It may be worth putting something in, and then you can always pull it out, right? You can always lower the levy, but, I don't know,
Yeah.
food for
Right,
thought.
we'd have until that first December meeting to reduce it, so we could put something in there, and then, the only bad thing is it's gonna show up on residents',
Being intrusive
property
taxation.
tax notices, so there might be some feedback from people that, you know,
Unless we'd be comfortable enough knowing that our building fees are probably going to be higher than what we've anticipated, and we'll be able to carry over some money, right?
yeah, we'll probably have a nice chunk to set aside in the revenue stabilization fund, so that would be an option too.
And I'd rather get that feedback and be public about, you know, potential impact than bury it somewhere.
Right.
Okay.
In terms of legal fees, the 2016 and 2017, we spent roughly 90,000 each of those years. For 2018, we budgeted 55,000, so we did back that down a little bit. Through August of this year, we've spent about 38,000 on legal fees, but like you said, we don't have the open meeting law legal fees going on, so.
Well, and again, I was looking at it as two separate buckets. One is what's our in-house, you know, what is Kennedy and Graven, and then the OML separately.
Yeah, and what
We don't have to go into it tonight, but I guess for the next conversation, I'd like to have kind of
okay.
an accounting of both of those things, please.
Yeah, Kelly, when you're talking about the 38,000 we spent so far, that is not counting open meeting law.
That does include,
It does?
it does, yes,
Open meeting law for our attorney, but not
for both
for
attorneys.
both of them?
Yep,
Well,
For
you only
2018.
have one. Again,
Yeah,
Davos is not part of that.
right. He certainly spends time on that, which is running up his,
Well, and that's the reason why I'd like to see an accounting for Kennedy and Graven. And I know it's been broken out in the past in terms of what that time is billed for. So that's kind of the piece that I'd like to understand that way. So yeah, in that case, both sides.
okay. Yeah, I can get that for the next meeting. So in terms of the increases, the additional public worker, with 9 months of work in, the cost is about 54,000. However, we're going to allocate about 8,000 to the utility funds, so about 46,000 of that goes into the general fund. And this position would be working primarily in the streets and stormwater divisions.
Is that, what's the trade-off there? Are we reducing overtime or increasing level of service? What's the payoff for that 54,000?
I don't foresee that it would reduce much overtime. Maybe in the winter when there's snow plowing going on, there would be some benefit in the overtime. Primarily, it's just related to the growth in the city. You know, with each new development we have, there's more streets to maintain, there are more parks to maintain. So
This is more anticipating.
this is just a reflection of the growth in
reduction
the
in
city.
service is what, I mean,
Yeah, the trade-off is.
we just wouldn't be able to do some things that we would be able to do with one more guy.
Okay.
The fuel card reader would cost $30,000, and this would be located at the Public Works Building. Right now, the fuel station is used by Public Works, building inspections, and fire department personnel, and we rely on them to manually record how much fuel they're using, which truck they're using, things like that. This would automate that, and it would provide some security and more accuracy in the process. This was originally planned to be part of the Public Works building, but it got cut when we were fine-tuning the budget, so. And then the replacement of the Katy Hills Park playground equipment. This equipment was installed over 31 years ago, so it's past its useful life. The estimated cost to do all of the work at the park is about $50,000, and it will be done in conjunction with the building of well 2.5, which is in the area. And then what they will do is they will work with the residents in that neighborhood to determine what they'd like to see in that park, because the demographics of that neighborhood have probably changed quite a bit in the last 31 years. So in terms of overall numbers for the general fund, the revenues are projected at $5.16 million compared to about $4.8 million last year, up about 8%. Expenditures are increasing from $4.15 million to about $4.4 million, and that's about a 5.8% increase. The transfers are increasing $170,000, and that's largely due to the long-term street maintenance fund increase and the Parks and Trails fund increase. So, and as in accord with our policy, the city would also end the year with a 30% unassigned fund balance. The largest part of the revenues comes from taxes and franchise fees, just over $4.1 million. And of that amount, $72,000 comes from franchise fees. And the balance, which is about $4.05 million, comes from the property taxes. One of the next larger categories is charges for services. And there's two primary revenue sources in this category. One is the plan check fees component to our building permits. And then the other one is rent that we collect for cell towers. Licenses and permits make up about $500,000 in the budgets.
Excuse
in
me,
the budget.
Just out of curiosity, how much are the license fees for cell towers approximately?
We have 3, and they average about $35,000 a year.
Okay. Each or total?
Yeah,
Okay.
some are a little more, some are a little less,
Okay.
but right around that level.
Thank you.
So on that same train of thought, the small cellular project bill, whatever conversation, is that, I think there was an attempt at one point that was going to go through in a way that was negative to our budgets. And I think that stopped, but I guess I didn't hear what the final story was. And do we expect any impact on our budgets from that technology change?
I don't know for sure on that, but I don't think it was going to impact the amount we got from our cell tower leases, but I think it had more to do with the city's ability to regulate those small cell towers and where they'd be placed, and I think that was the big issue.
Hello. The other big part of it was that they were going to limit your ability to recover costs that you might spend in reviewing those facility placements. So if you used an outside consultant to review what they were proposing, you would be capped at how much you could recover from the cell company that was providing it. So the bill that got passed at the league ended up being something that was at the legislature, ended up being something that was negotiated between the cell companies and the League of Minnesota Cities, and everybody was comfortable with where it landed, but now they're tackling federal legislation, so the whole big fight is now starting again at the federal level to work through those same issues. So for now, we're okay, but we'll see what happens.
Are we represented by Suburban Rate Authority in that
Correct.
battle too? So
Yep.
we do have a help in that area, but
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the licenses and permits categories, the bulk of that comes from the city's building permits, and then a lot of that is from the new home permits. We are projecting 111 new homes again for 2019. We've already surpassed that number this year, but I like to keep a conservative number for what we estimate for new homes, because we haven't had we had 198 last year, and I think we'll probably get 160 this year, but you never know when there's going to be a slowdown. So Intergovernmental revenue, there's just a couple categories in here. There's police aid, and then the fire department and public works will often apply for grants. And then the last category, other, that's our interest earnings, insurance dividends, things of that nature. In terms of expenditures, general government is going to be making up 35% of the budget at just over 1.5 million. So that would be our administration, planning, finance. There's not elections in 2019, but that typically would be in there. Our professional services budget, and then building maintenance for City Hall. Public safety is going to make up about 30%, or 1.3 million, and that would be primarily public work, or not public works, public safety, such as the fire department, the police contract, and then also our building inspections department is housed in this category. Public works is coming in at 24%, just over 1 million. And then parks and recreation at about 500,000. So in terms of where we're at with the property tax levy, if this budget were to be enacted, the general fund levy would need to go from 3.715 million to 4.06 million. That's about $345,000 or 9.3%. The debt service levy for next year is just going up slightly. It's going up about $2,500. So the overall levy would go up about 7.2%, or $347,500. In terms of the city's levy history, the light green bar I'm showing shows what's been happening with the general fund. And you can see that from 2009 and 2010, the levy actually did decrease for quite a few years due to the Great Recession. And then beginning in 2016, it's started to go up again. The green bar shows the levy for the recreation center. You can see that that was eliminated after 2016. And that was due to the refunding of the bonds for that facility. And then the blue bar shows the debt service levy. So that's gone up, and that's largely due to the street reconstruction projects we've been doing every year. So that covers the levy. In terms of tax impact, we are benefiting from the increase in net tax capacity year over year from 2018 to 2019. It's going up 8.7%. So what that means is even though the levy is going up, the tax rate would actually go down. It would go down at about 1.1%. The median valued home increased about 2% year over year. If this levy were enacted, taxes on that median valued home would go up about $12, which is less than 1%. And then I just have a couple of statistics showing projected growth in population and then what that means for taxes per capita. In looking at the tax rate history and projections for the city, you can see that for 4 years, beginning in 2008, the city had a very flat tax levy. It was right around 37.4%. It spiked up a little bit in 2012 and 2013 before it started to go down. And since 2015, we've really been able to keep it low and below that 33% level. The rate projected for 2019 with this budget would be 32.38%. What that means in terms of the median valued home and taxes paid in prior years, you can see that the median valued home decreased in value beginning in 2009 through 2013. Since then, it's slowly started to creep up again. It's fully regained the value lost. But if you look at taxes, in 2009, that median valued home was paying $1,381 in taxes. And in 2019, they'd be paying $1,306. So $75 less than the 2009 amount. The city's long-term financial plan looks out through 2028, and it takes a look at the budget, the levy, and the tax rate based on a set of assumptions. So some of the key assumptions are how many new homes, and so we've got that at 111 indefinitely. We're projecting other revenues to increase 2.5% annually. Expenditures would increase 3% each year, plus we would have a public works staff member added every other year. We'd project that the market value and the median valued home would go up by 2.5% each year, and that we would continue to issue bonds for street reconstruction and other projects, and continue to do the transfers to the various equipment funds and the long-term street maintenance and the Parks and Trails Fund. So what that means, going through 2028, the annual tax rate is expected to remain in that 31 to 33% range each year. The general fund will continue to maintain a 30% unassigned fund balance. And then you can see households are projected to increase 34% in that 10-year horizon, and population would increase 33%. And one note of really good news is the interfund loan to the water fund would be fully paid off in 2019.
And how much is that a year again?
It's been about $150,000 a year.
That was from the 13 acres?
Yes. So I've given you the numbers for what's currently in the budget, but I wanted to also mention if the council wanted to maintain a flat tax rate, what that could mean. So if the tax rate remained at 32.75%, that would generate an additional $50,000 in tax revenue. And it could be used for a number of currently unfunded projects. Some of the things the council has talked about is pedestrian crossing enhancements on County Road 11. We have a downtown sidewalk study going on right now, which is to make the sidewalks ADA compliant. And I think we'll have those numbers later this fall. There are a number of park and trail improvements that are unfunded. And then parking improvements in the downtown have also been brought up quite frequently. Now, since we've last talked about finances, I have been working with the city's municipal advisor on money that we have in our tax increment District 3. So that district will probably be decertified in 2020, but when we decertify it, it's estimated that we're going to have about $480,000 in pooling money that we could use for a TIF-eligible project anywhere in the city. So things like the crossing enhancements, the downtown sidewalk replacement, and the parking improvements would all fall in that category. So when we're doing these things, we should also keep in mind that there's $480,000 in TIF money available for these projects as well.
So I used to think I knew something about TIF, but you just threw a curveball that I don't completely recognize. Are you saying there's actually money in a fund that is available to be spent for qualifying projects?
There will be by the end of 2020. So we have some of it now, but as tax increment continues to come in through 2020, at the end of 2020, we will have approximately $480,000.
And that money's not earmarked for anything today?
No.
And if we don't spend it?
From what I understand, we can keep it indefinitely in the fund and use it at some point. It would not have to go back to
Okay,
be
that's what I was
redistributed.
concerned.
But it can't be used for improvement, or it can't be used for, like, we couldn't resurface a parking lot. It has to be for capital improvements, correct? It can't
would-
be for repair or maintenance kind of thing. Is that?
It's more of a replacement type of thing. So, and it can't be used for a building, and it can't be used for a park.
Is this part of that 25% that would have been negotiated on each TIF program? So is it part of the 25% that just didn't get spent on a number of different projects, or what is it?
There is a 25% ratio, but it's not like the Victoria Flats project where the city was earmarked 25% and the developer was earmarked 75%. In this case, the 25% comes to the state's pooling rules for TIF. So each year, after you've had the TIF district in place for 6 years, you have to spend 75% of the money on your TIF eligible project that you identified at the onset. You then have the ability to take that 25% that also came in and use that for pooling purposes. So, and you don't have to use it in any given year, it can accumulate. So that's where the 480,000
There were
is coming
projects
from.
where we didn't go after that 25%.
Right, we haven't used it, so it's
Okay.
been accumulating and it will continue to accumulate for a couple more years.
So it's 480K by 2020?
Yes.
And it's probably a result of property being valued higher than what was originally estimated, right?
Right, this TIF district, I think, was certified in 2003, so
What's in it, if you don't know off the top of your
which properties, or?
head? Yeah, roughly. What's the area?
Probably the biggest parcel in it is the Victoria condos, so,
The
Wednesday,
Wensman.
yes.
Steger Lane.
And then there's a few other smaller ones, but most of the value comes from that particular parcel.
When does that TIF expire on the Wensman project?
It was scheduled to expire in 2028, but our bonds will be repaid in 2020. And so once you've repaid the bonds for a TIF district, you have to decertify it. So it'll be decertified early. So if the council did decide to keep the tax rate flat, the impact to the median valued homeowner would be their tax rate increase in 2019 would be $25 instead of $12.
I'm looking at 2 back-to-back years of the biggest levy rate increases in the 8 years I've sat up here, and I'm thinking the other direction. I'm thinking, how do we lower the tax rate? What do we not do?
I'm not agreeing with you.
All right.
I mean, if you did raise it, put that 50,000 back in now, of course, you could always take it out at the final approval of the budget, but it would go in the hearings for the.
I think in the last 8 years, I can't recall a time where we did not go with the originally projected. I don't think it was ever walked back. Wouldn't mind doing that, but history says we haven't done that.
I think Kelly has told me that.
One project that didn't get mentioned in the wish list was the Wasserman Park. Is that wholly separate? We can't use TIF for that, obviously.
No, we can't use TIF for that, and if we did issue bonds for that, like, say we decided to issue bonds this fall, we could add that debt service levy on. That's the one exception, or one of the few exceptions to your preliminary levy. If you issue debt, you can add on the debt service for that debt to your levy, so.
Or you could finance the debt service franchise fees or some other way.
Yeah, like, council members Crowley and Striegel weren't at the meeting last Friday, but when we were talking about the ideas for Lake Wasserman Park and how to finance it, one of the things that came up was we could issue bonds, but we could use franchise fee revenue to pay for that, and that would mean that there wouldn't be a tax increase for residents. So, and I think that's going to come back at a future council meeting to talk about that project.
Would you increase the franchise fee?
We would not have to increase the franchise
We
fee.
have extra.
We have extra right now.
And that comes from what source? What-
That's the natural gas and the electric franchise fees.
Burying the power lines.
Yep.
It would result in maybe taking longer to bury all the power lines, is that?
That's correct. We, instead of using the money that's coming in to accelerate the undergrounding of the city's power lines, we could maybe scale that back a little bit. We'd still be able to do some undergrounding, but we'd have to reduce it to the tune of about $210,000 a year, which would be the debt service on the Lake Wasserman Park bonds if they were issued.
maybe we should look at the debt outlook. You've got a schedule in your software that shows projected debt for the next 10 years. Can you put that up, or is it,
I should be able to. I'm gonna kind of zoom in on this.
so I think what's interesting, if you look at this, our current level of outstanding debt, what's the column that's,
The column that's boxed in is the 2019.
okay, 2019. So we're at 25.8 in 2018. And if you go to the left, if you were to go back to 2012, that'd be about 33 million. So we have a trend where our debt was up in that 33 plus range. Actually, it was at 39 million, but there was some refunding going on, so the effective debt was probably in that 33, 34 range. And we're coming down, how far do you go out here? See, this shows that our debt is decreasing to where it's gonna be about 50 plus % of what it was a number of years ago. And you've loaded these numbers, if I understand, Kelly, in every project you can think of.
I do have most of the projects in here. I do not have
You
the
don't have
Wasserman.
Wasserman.
I don't have Wasserman.
The point is, Wasserman isn't even in here. So consequently, you know, this city's gonna grow, and according to this, we haven't, you know, we're decreasing debt rapidly. And so, we either, you know, we have to probably take a different look at this and see, you know, realistically, the city can handle a higher debt load with all that's going on in the future.
And I agree with you in terms of debt per capita is an important metric.
Right.
The one thing that I do get nervous about short term is the tax supported debt. And so if you sorry, if you can scroll on the left, show you that which line that is. So when you look at net tax supported debt, you know, 8.4, 11, 10.4, 10.1, 10.1.
6.
And so it does go down in the future, but we've got a couple of years in here where while the debt in itself is dropping, the tax supported piece is fairly flat, meaning a greater percentage of our debt or our budget is going to pay debt. And that was one of the things when we started a debt management policy a few years ago was
Yep.
total debt and debt as a percent of the total budget, and not wanting to have our hands tied long-term, right? Removing our flexibility by having
Right.
a growing portion of our budget going to paying debt service, things that we've already done.
So per our policy, what is the percentage we want to stay under?
So we have two metrics. So the first one here is net tax supported debt as a percentage of estimated market value cannot exceed 1.5%. So, you know, we've been as high as
This shows we're gonna-
0.85, but
We're trending down significantly.
yeah, we're
in that.
trending down to about 0.28% in 2028,
And our policy allows for how much? 1.5?
1.5. And then the second metric is debt levy as a percent of the total levy cannot be more than 30%. So we've been as high as 26.5%. In 2019, we'd be down to about 22%. And then that, it increases a little bit in 22 and 23.
And that's the number. I'm just saying, let's keep that in mind before we start taking
Yeah.
on more debt or.
Yeah, and in
Do
those
other
2
things with the
years,
money.
I have projected in the Steiger Lake Lane West project at 4 million, which is kind of a worst-case scenario if the city fully funded that whole project, which I don't think is the likely outcome, but it's the most conservative estimate, so.
And I know generally these things are in there, but just confirm, our future wells, pumping stations, water treatment plant number 2, all in here somewhere?
Those would be in the total outstanding debt number. They would not fall in the net tax supported debt number because anything related to the utilities is supported by user fees.
But they are in that
But they're in
top
the
line.
total.
They're in the top line, yes.
Our new well, the big well is in there.
Yes, we have 2 wells planned. One well will have cash for, the other one will have to bond for.
Then, but neither Lake Wasserman Park nor a pool are part of this number.
No,
Okay, thank you.
I think we would have seen the blip from a pool in the numbers.
Maybe more than a blip. Anyways,
So just to wrap up, the next step is to adopt the preliminary budget and levy, and that would be September 10th. And like I said, October, November, we'll continue to refine the general fund budget and levy, but we'll also begin working on the capital improvement plan and the utility fund and rec center budgets. We'll have another council budget workshop in November. And then December 10th would be the date to do the final budget and levy adoption. So with that, I'd look for any feedback for what you'd like to see on September 10th.
I would concur with Councilmember Striegel in trying to lower the rate, excuse me.
and just as a summary, the accounting for the legal for both
Yep, I'll get
KG
that.
and OML separately. Do we,
I'd like to see whatever we have for that meeting in the context of our 5 or 10-year plan. So just looking at the year, to me, is like having goggles on. We should be looking at the plan as it goes out at least 5 years before we make hard decisions on the budget for an individual year.
every long-term financial plan that I've been involved in the private sector in a 5-year window always builds in a recession somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I just think that's, maybe it never comes, maybe it gets pushed out every year, but we should keep that in mind and not look at rising property values as a given, not look at increasing building or even flat building permit revenue as a given, and have some capacitance in there for that.
Any other comments?
No.
Kelly, you're done with your presentation?
I am.
Well
Thank you.
done, Thank you.
Good job.
I think we'll close out the meeting. We need probably a 5-minute break here, so we'll start the council meeting a few minutes late.
That patch of ground south of the school, is that for the soccer field?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not part of your school district?
So, yeah, the one you're talking about just to the west of it?
Southwest, yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be,
Of the new high school.
right, but that's not part of the school district, or is it? They're just breaking ground, it's all leveled out.
So what that's actually the bus garage owner bought that. He's gonna put a bus garage.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah.
But you have a private, where,
Saw the emails this afternoon.
I saw something.
that
Let me
has,
see if Carol has.
is it going to?
So really, there's no.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha, okay. That's what I thought.
Pat, I think we're going to have to rush into our meeting here in a couple of minutes.
All right,
You can
stop
distribute.
visiting, in other words.
Yeah, that's translated.
I don't know that they are though.
Thank you. Welcome back.
You know, as I saw your name on the thing, I thought, I wonder why ISD 112 isn't. We're in there more than they are.
I'll talk to Clint about that. Reading material.
Tell him we haven't, I don't think we've met him since he's joined. No, he hasn't been here yet.
I'll put a little pressure on.
Thank you. Competition.
Great.
He's under.
I think we should start. Mayor Funk is not going to be here, I take it.
I emailed him and I got no answer, so I don't know.
Nothing.
Okay, welcome to the August 27th Victoria City Council meeting. Call to order. This is, I'm Mayor Pro Tem Tom Vogt, and I'll be presiding over the meeting today. First order of business is a Pledge of Allegiance. Second order of business is the open forum. We have two.
Adopt agenda?
Adopt the agenda, yes. Second order of business, adopt the agenda. Do we have a motion approving the agenda as written, or are there any changes requested?
I move we adopt the agenda as written.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion is unanimous. Third item is the open forum. The open forum allows citizens in the audience to speak at the podium for a time of not to exceed 5 minutes. The first person requesting an open forum is Scott Stenslad. Scott, I can't read your handwriting.
Hello, it's Scott Stensland, and I live at 5760 Marsh Lake Road. And one of the items on the agenda tonight is Marsh Lake Road, and so I was just, I think you've all got some letters from some of my neighbors, and I'd just like to share a couple comments. Before I do that, I'd like to thank all of you and thank staff, especially Kara. I think it's 3 years now we've been talking about this, almost 3 years on Marsh Lake Road.
Mr. Mayor, we might hear this after, when we put this agenda item on. This is usually for stuff that's not on the agenda.
Well, not to interrupt you, Doug, I just, if it is a discussion and we have an opportunity to talk, I'd be more than happy to wait till later, but I wasn't sure if, sometimes the discussion is more with the council and not including us. If we have an opportunity to talk, I can wait. I'd be happy to.
Is Jeremy?
Jeremy's here also, yeah.
So if you gentlemen would like to stay for the meeting and wait for the discussion on Marsh Lake Road, it would be more appropriate.
I think so too, but I wasn't sure, like I said, I wasn't sure if I'd have an opportunity at the time. Thanks, Doug.
That's a good suggestion. We'll
Good.
see you in a little bit. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second, any seconds?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of approving the consent agenda? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the
Motion passed.
motion is unanimous. Okay, next item. We have a visitor's presentation. Superintendent Pat Devine from the Waconia Public School District.
Thank you, council members, for having me tonight. My name is Pat Devine. I'm superintendent of ISD 110, Waconia Public Schools. As many of you know, I'd like to come here at least once a year to give you a little update of what's going on in our school district, even though it's a fraction of the Victoria city. We do have part of the city is in Waconia School District. So I always like to kind of give you an update of what we're at and what's going on in our school district. And so first I'll just kind of start with probably the newest two things over the summer. It's nothing real big. And which way do I point, Kara?
Right over to me.
Right over here. There we go. The last year we put in a new stadium field, but we didn't put stadium seating in. And part of that we were waiting to see if we had the revenue remaining from the building bond referendum, and we did. So the stadium seating is actually going in as we talk. Some will say, well, it should be there by now. Well, we thought so too. The weather kind of delayed us for the May rains and early June rains. They didn't get in there until about mid to late June. Then they found out that the dirt was not ready for foundation, so they took about another month to trade out the dirt. And so now we're finally getting to a point where the foundation's down, and we hope to open that our homecoming week, which is the last week of September. So that's slated to be a new stadium there with 1,500 seats on one side and 500 on the visitor side, and should be a really fun place to view a ball game. The other piece that, if you ever drive around Waconia much, there's a Southview Elementary that has, for about 20 years, had this wall with metal inserts where the windows used to be, and they could never contain paint. So it always was peeling. No matter when you drove by it, it was peeling. It was kind of like, how in the world can you have your buildings looking like that? Well, we finally fixed it. We put all bricks in and put some nice windows in there, so that's a much better look for us. Some of the things left from just to kind of highlight from the $75 million bond referendum that we had in 2014 is our new school did open last fall. Really serves our high school well. The middle school moved to the old high school building, and the year before that we opened Lake Town Elementary, which is on the bottom there. A lot of our educational spaces has evolved to more of a modern way of teaching, with allowing students with flexible seating and so on. And then we're really proud of our 1,000-seat auditorium that we put in. We have a performing arts center that we bring in acts from outside, plus of all of our own school acts. So we feel really good about that, and that's been functioning really well. And one thing to highlight is that's a $75 million bond, and for those of you that are in this business, you understand that bonds are for building and operating levies are for learning. So we can't use that building money for operating costs, and I'll get to that story here in a little bit. But after the buildings were all put in place, we said let's get our strategic roadmap to look like our buildings. Let's get them up to date, and let's make them something that we want to make sure we deliver every day. And so what you see is kind of a word cloud of what we deliver. This is our goals every day, is to deliver for students, for parents, and for staff, that we make sure we deliver on this every day. And we set our goals toward that. So we're real proud of where we're at and what we ended up developing. It was a classroom to boardroom process that took about 6 months, and really had a lot of input sessions by both staff and by community before we came to this, and now it's a 3-year roadmap instead of a 6 to 7 year. And we call it a roadmap because every year we revisit it, and if we need to turn in a different direction, we will, because we want to stay modern at all times, and we want to make this something that lives and breathes versus something that sits on a shelf. So we're real proud of where what we have for our strategic roadmap, and we're using that to guide us as we move along. Along with that, when we're doing that research as far as what we were going to do with our strategic roadmap, we really took a lot of input on where we're at right now. And we're real proud of where we're at right now. If you look at some of those percentages, those will rank up with anybody in the state. As a matter of fact, U.S. News and Report last year came out with the top 100 schools in every state in the nation, and Waconia Public Schools was ranked 4th in the state of Minnesota, behind Wayzata, Edina, and Minnetonka. So we feel really strong that we've developed a great program. Our kids are receiving a great program, and our schools deliver that. So I'm really proud of who we are and what we're doing there. And we know that between our strategic plan and where we're at, we are ready for the future. One of the things we also know is that our finances are not quite ready for the future. We need to go out for an operating levy. We strategically made some decisions on what to do with our fund balance and not to go out to voters for a while. And because of that, we are at that point now. We need to. And we have a video that kind of describes it instead of me talking the whole time. It's about a 2-minute video that will tell the story.
At Waconia Public Schools, when we say we are 110, just exactly what does that mean? For starters, it means we're all in this together. In a recent community survey, 81% agreed that strong public schools equal a strong community. Over the past 30 years, we've grown together, and we've supported each other along the way. In 2014, voters said yes to a $75 million bond referendum. Funds from the referendum, which can only be used for buildings, not operating expenses, allowed Waconia Public Schools to create the facilities necessary to respond to growth. The result of our collective efforts is success. In the classroom, in the community, and in life. We are 110 also means we build long-lasting relationships. We build trust. Year after year, Waconia Public Schools is recognized for financial reporting, receiving a national award for 7 years running. The community also gives high marks. 77% are satisfied with the district's financial management. When it comes to operating expenses, state funding for school operations has not kept pace with inflation for the past several years. Many districts have made up for the funding gap by passing an operating levy. There's a wide range, but some communities have passed levies that offer support of nearly $2,000 per student. Waconia Public Schools currently has 0 voter-approved operating levy dollars. To make up the difference, the district has been spending down the fund balance. Those funds will be depleted in the near future, and Waconia Public Schools must do one of 3 things: raise revenue, make cuts, or a combination of both. After considering the options, the school board made a unanimous decision to place an operating levy question on the November 6th ballot. If approved, the estimated tax impact on a $300,000 home would be about $23 per month. If the operating levy is approved, it would last for 10 years, providing critical funding to cover the gap, allowing Waconia Public Schools to maintain and enhance the high-quality educational programming that the community has come to expect. Much more information can be found on the website. And remember to vote on Tuesday, November 6th.
So that video really summarizes all the main highlights and details of how we got there and why we're there. It was a real conscious effort by our school board to say we're not going to go out until we absolutely have to. The last time that the school district had an operating levy where they passed was 2007. And for those that know school finance, we were at 725. Well, 724 of that's been absorbed through state authorities. 424 is on all school districts, and then 300 is allowed by the school board to approve. So that was absorbed about 6 years ago. So we've had a zero voter levy, $0 on a voter levy for almost 6 years. So we've intentionally said we will keep our high program and spend down the fund balance and won't come after and ask for any tax money until we absolutely have to. Well, we're at that spot right now. I think one of the things that highlights it probably the most is the cost of living from where the state has not kept up with the cost of living, but we've tried to do it with growth and with our fund balance, and we just can't maintain that anymore. What happens if it does, if it approves? If the operating levy is approved, some of the things that will continue is our high level of educational programming. We like where we're at. We think we do a nice job. We want to continue that. We have started to do business partnerships to get some real authentic learning for our students, especially our secondary students, to get into the industries and actually see how to do the job and put them out to the industries to learn that. So we want to continue enhancing that program. Strengthen our support system. Mental health is a big issue in all school districts, and we want to make sure that we have our support system that can help students that need that support. Provide more voice and choice. There's a term called personalized learning, which is really basically having the students show you how they know the information in the way they like to show you. And so we want to make sure we invest more into that area. And we have support. We want to support the strategic planning that we have done and the goals that we've set in our strategic roadmap. And then lastly, as we grow, there's new activities all the time that students want to have. And if the numbers are there, we want to explore and add new academic and athletic and other activity programs. So that's what happens if it's approved. If it doesn't approve, it's basically a big reduction in pretty much all areas. And it starts, most of our budget, about 85% of our budget's on personnel, so it'd be a personnel thing. So we reduce teaching staff, which would increase class sizes. We reduce administrative staff. We reduce the support staff. We would reduce or eliminate some of our extracurricular activities. We would reduce some of the world language offerings and music and art programs, and then we'd increase fees. So that's how we could manage a $2.1 million deficit if we needed to make that cut if it did not pass. So that's where we're at for our operating levy this fall. It is an election on November 6th, which there won't be a lot of advertising going on for our election, but I think you'll be watching a lot of other ads for political ads. So we just hope that something like this, people are listening out there and going, oh, I do need to vote for a school, or decide to vote what I need to vote for the school at that time. If you have questions, we have a designated button on our website. We have a designated referendum email and a designated referendum phone for people to ask questions. We have question and answer on our website. We have started a kind of a chant, and our kids do it at the ball games, where we say, "We are 110." We believe in that. We work really hard to set that atmosphere that we're all one, and we work hard together. So we're doing the same thing with our operating levy, going around, making sure everybody knows about it. So that's what I have tonight for the updates of ISD 110.
I have a question.
Yes.
What percentage of Waconia's enrollment is from Victoria?
So we're about 20% right now. It's we have maybe not that much, probably 15%. We have about 25% from Minnetrista, St. Bonnie area, and about 15% from Victoria. There's a lot of open enrollment that we lose out of Lakebridge. They go to one of three schools, and it's either our school, Eastern Carver County, or Minnetonka, because Minnetonka does drive a bus in there. So that's our main neighborhood for Victoria, is the Lakebridge area. So we lose quite a few out of there. So I should say, Tom, it's the potential of 15%. We probably are more about 8%.
So you think a portion of those kids are going to Minnetonka?
They are.
The sell job that Minnetonka does, the tremendous...
yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a great marketing department.
effort that they're doing.
There is a great marketing. Yeah. There's a whole other conversation about that. Questions you might have or were thinking when you saw this?
I think we've done everything we can here.
Yep, you have. So I appreciate you having me here. I will leave some of the information behind if you I know it's not for all the voters here. If you're really interested in levies, you can look at it and see what it looks like. And if you're one of our residents, I would encourage you to do so, to read and know all about it. So
thank you, and good luck on your levy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next portion of the meeting, we're going to have a couple public hearings for noise permits. So Doug, you're going to take us through those?
Mr. Mayor, yes, first public hearing is for a noise permit at 6350 Baycliff Road, so I would suggest you open that public hearing. My motion.
Can I make that motion, or does make a motion to open the public hearing regarding the noise permit for Baycliff Road?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion is approved unanimously. Any comments? Anyone want to speak to this public hearing related to this permit? Okay, going once, going twice, I'll close the hearing.
Motion to close?
Mr. Mayor, then we would need a motion to approve.
Make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Hearing is closed unanimously.
I'll make a motion to approve a temporary noise permit for Nate and Carissa Stangler at 6350 Baycliff Road for Saturday, October 13th,
Second.
2018 until 11:30 p.m.
Do we have a second?
Second, but discussion point. We didn't vote when we actually opened the public hearing, so should we do that, or?
That's right, let's go back before we open this hearing.
Well, hold on.
Technically, you don't need, just the mayor opens it. You don't need a motion to open it, but you need a motion.
Thank you.
Close it?
We're
Okay.
good.
Well, before we open the second,
No. Do we need to vote on this one now? All in favor?
Discussion on it? Any-
Discussion.
Yeah.
we're talking about the first motion. The
Yep.
First, yes. Any discussion related to this permit?
So has there been any input from the public on this thing? Has anybody called? Would you get a,
Mr. Mayor, we had one call, I think just asking questions about whether we'd set up something for parking, and we have.
so they were satisfied?
Yes.
Okay, any further comments? Do I have a motion to
Made the motion.
approve or deny this a temporary noise permit?
I think we're in discussion, so we need to vote.
I think we have a motion and a second on it.
Okay. All in favor of approving the temporary noise permit for Dayton Carissa Stangler at 6350 Baycliff Road for Saturday, October 13th, 2018, until 11:30 p.m.?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, open the second public hearing for, what's the address?
Mr. Mayor, this is Lions Park, 8339 Victoria Drive.
And this will be for September 22nd.
Are you opening the public hearing?
I'm hereby opening the public hearing for the noise permit for Frabella Corporation of Lions Park, September 22nd, 2018. Anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Okay.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council and everybody in attendance. My name's Tom O'Neill. I'm representative from Free Bella. Free Bella is a organization, a group of friends. We all grew up in the area. In fact, most of us still live in the area. My friend Mike is a resident. My mom lives over on Roy Street. My brother lives on Auburn Drive. My sister on Victoria Drive. Two other sisters run the insurance agency next door, Cornerstone. We're all from here. And I don't know, about 18 years ago, we lost two friends. One young man named Jeff Peterson. He was a Victoria resident, and another young woman named Anna Weston. And when we were kids, I guess, I'm almost 40 years old now, but it was 18 years ago, we were just in college. Losing those two friends was a big deal to the group of us. And together we created an annual event that we called Free Bella Festival, named after our friends Anna and Jeff. We called Anna Annabelle and Jeff Free Froth, so Free Bella was born. And the group of us got together every year since to celebrate their lives and to be there for each other. And this year we were approached by our friends who manage a nonprofit organization that Anna's mom started. Anna died from an eating disorder 18 years ago. And the nonprofit organization who we support every year asked us if we could support a little extra this year and maybe raise some more money for their cause. So we got an idea, the group of us, to throw a charity concert in their honor. And we wanted to do it right here in our home in Victoria. And my sister, who's on the Lions, she had run a few events there at the park before, and she thought we could utilize their team and their connections to make that happen. And we found 5 bands to play on September 22nd during the day, and we got professional sound and stage crew to come in and make sure that we're doing it right. They've got the tools and the technology to keep the sound somewhat contained within the park. I could go into the technical details if anyone's interested, but the idea is that we do our best to maintain the levels in the listening audience and not too far outside of the park there. But I wanted to make sure that I gave the council and the city the opportunity to understand that this event, that we're taking all the precautions necessary to make sure it's a safe and fun event. It's for a really good cause. It's all of our profit goes to this charity, and we'd really love the city's support in throwing this event and making sure that we do a really good job representing our city of Victoria when we bring in some visitors to raise money.
Questions?
Yeah.
5 bands, it sounds like it's going to be a pretty big event. Do you
Yeah.
have any idea of the numbers that you're hoping to draw?
Yeah, so far we've sold about 400 tickets. Our goal is to sell a little over 1,000, so almost 1,500. And so we've been working with the City of Victoria here and the Parks Department. We've got a plan for parking. We've got a plan for safety, and like I said, we've got the noise thing I think pretty well figured out. We do. Yep. So we've hired a professional security firm that does concerts like this quite a bit, and I think that there's going to be 14 security professionals on site, if that number is correct, Mike. And yeah, the parking situation, we've been working with the city to make sure that we've got indicators on all the neighborhood roads to say that they can only park on one side. We've got a team of volunteers who will be kind of monitoring that and making sure people are doing that. And we've got 2 school buses that will run from the rec center where we're going to direct most of the parking to.
So I see you've got alcohol sales.
That's right.
The party goes till 10:30. I thought those events close at 10.
The music goes until 7, and we pretty much close doors until 7. We've got a permit for the park, we've got the reservation at the park till later so that we can make sure we clean up that night. So, yep.
Sounds like a very well organized and great event. Can you name who the charity is that will be the beneficiary? You mentioned it.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's called the Emily Program Foundation. So our friend Anna Weston, when she passed away, her mom started what was called the Anna Weston Foundation, and they actually had a treatment center right in Chaska. It's called the Anna Weston House. They recently merged with a bigger group called the Emily Program to create this new nonprofit, but it's the Emily Program Foundation.
Great. Thank you.
So our Parks director isn't here. How does this compare to some of the normal festivities that occur at Alliance Park in terms of number of people and cars and so on? Do we have any?
Mr. Mayor, I
Is
don't.
bigger, a smaller?
Unless
or-
Kara knows, I don't know.
Like the softball tournaments? Softball tournaments?
That's what we were told.
Right. Yep.
So,
We have worked with them, and the staff will actually be putting the no parking signs up in the whole area around there as we do for softball.
so the neighborhood's been notified? That
Yeah,
this
my
is
mom
gonna
got a letter.
happen?
She texted me a picture right away.
Has there been any neighborhood comment, anything
Not that I'm aware of.
one way or the other? Okay, thank you.
Any other public comments in the hearing? Okay, so I'll close the hearing and then we'll take a vote.
So, Acting Mayor, it's a good opportunity just to explain what Cindy said. She's right. You, as the parliamentarian mayor, the acting mayor, when we have these hearings, they're statutorily required, and so the parliamentarian can declare them open. But when you're going to cut off public input, when you're going to close the hearing, you require a council vote. So you declare the hearing open, which you did, and then now you would take a vote to close it.
Okay, well, so we're going to take a vote to close the meeting.
I
Then
move
we'll
we
take a-
close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Here, the hearing is closed on an unanimous basis. So at this point, do we take,
I move.
get a motion to approve the noise permit?
I move we approve a temporary noise permit for Free Bella Corporation at Lions Park, 8339 Victoria Drive for Saturday, September 22nd, 2018, from 10:30 a.m. until 7 p.m.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Next order of business. We have the Vassar sketch plat, and Pat, you're going to take us through this.
Yes, good evening, Acting Mayor and members of the City Council. The applicant, Terry Hartman, is requesting a sketch plan, preliminary comments from the City Council on the proposed development. No motion is needed tonight. Again, the applicant is just asking for preliminary comments. The subject property is currently undeveloped. The applicant is seeking to rezone the property from agricultural to R2, which is a single-family residential. The comprehensive plan guides this area to be low-density residential. The proposal is consistent with that guidance. Based on the comments from the public and the Planning Commission, the applicant submitted a sketch plan with 33 lots and an outlot A, which would preserve much of the existing woods. You see on the proposed plan in front of you, the outlot is on the western part of the development. The development consists of a continuation of Bertle Way, and then a cul-de-sac, and then a connection between the two cul-de-sacs with a public trail that would go through Outlot A. This subdivision would connect the Laketown neighborhood to the north to the future development to the south. The western third of the site is heavily wooded. A tree survey has not yet been submitted. That would be submitted as part of the preliminary plat application. Staff walked the woods and noticed that most of the trees are basswood and ash trees. Didn't see too many oak or maple trees. A small wetland is located on the southeast portion or the corner of the site. The applicant is planning to fill that wetland and pay the wetland mitigation fee. As the applicant is requesting this to be rezoned to R2 single-family residential, the minimum lot size for R2 for semi-detached villas is 50 feet, while the minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. These lot dimensions are slightly smaller than the single-family lots north of that development. The 33 villa home units would be detached, and each would be located on a private lot with private driveways. A homeowners association would most likely maintain the common areas of the development. Because of the villas, we would be requesting architecture plans to be submitted as part of the preliminary plat approval process. There is an existing trail north of the proposed development along County Road 11. The applicant is proposing to continue that trail in Outlot C going to the south. As I mentioned earlier, there is also a proposed trail that would connect the two cul-de-sacs with the rest of Laketown 11. There would be a sidewalk on the south side of the cul-de-sac. And the other thing you can see in the map in front of you is north of the development on Bertle Way, there is a sidewalk north of Hackmore Drive, but there is no sidewalk in front of those two homes. The applicant and staff are working out a plan to try to install a sidewalk there to connect the two developments with a sidewalk, which is important with the proximity of the elementary school there. We've talked to this property owner already about the possibility of installing the sidewalk. We have yet talked to this property owner about the sidewalk. The other thing we need to do is just to make sure that engineering-wise, it can be installed. So that's something that we still are work in progress.
Sort of curiosity, Kara, why wasn't that completed with Laketown?
No idea. Which isn't, I have no idea.
Because this development abuts the rear of an existing neighborhood, it will be important to buffer the two developments. The applicant is proposing to retain as much of the existing vegetation as possible to buffer the lots between 12 and 9, and then add more landscaping between the lots from 8 to 3. There's also going to be an 8-foot berm along County Road 11 with landscaping as a buffer. And then he's also going to include a buffer for this development and the future development south of this development.
What is on that, I guess that would be the corner of Hackamore and Bridle. Is that two empty platted lot sites, or is that an outlot? What is that?
No, those lots have been developed, so they have single-family homes.
This picture is 2 or 3 years old.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
So those are built out. Okay.
right, and there is also a house where that sidewalk would go in front of as well.
I think I just answered the question of why that sidewalk isn't there, is because that house on the corner was the first house built in that development. It was the model home. The streets weren't even there when that house was built.
It would be nice to see if this plat would have been taken from a contemporary photo so that we could see how the buffer and the buffer area near the road and the other development looks, because it looks like I can't picture in my mind what that area looks like in terms of how far the houses go toward the street and that sort of thing. You have something a little.
Whoops.
I think Kara's trying to pull up a more current aerial.
There you go. So,
So is that an 8-foot berm there already?
Yeah, it is a big berm there.
So
I
when you
don't,
say
I don't remember how high it is, but
Yeah.
there's
But
some
8
berming
feet?
and landscaping there.
Is 8 feet the height or 8 feet the width?
8 feet is the height. And that's required by our landscaping ordinance.
So how many feet? How many linear feet is that?
I believe it's about 50 feet wide. The outlet is 50 feet wide at least.
So when this was originally platted, was there supposed to have been a sidewalk there and it was just forgotten? Or, I mean, was there?
I went back to the construction plans and any of the plans, it was never proposed. So why we didn't catch it and require it is a mystery to me since we knew the road was going to go through. So I don't have a good answer from that, other than clearly it wasn't there.
So, sort of an unrelated topic, but this picture prompted the thought. There are 2 driveways in this photograph. What's our maximum width frontage of a driveway onto a road?
It's 24 feet wide at the right-of-way line. These 2 driveways are wider than that. There originally had been a cul-de-sac here, but when the builder came in a temporary turnaround, so a temporary cul-de-sac, and when the builder came in and built the lots, they removed the cul-de-sac without the city's approval. So the previous community development director and the fire chief worked with the property owners to have the builder add these additional wedges of pavement to make sure that we had a big enough turnaround. There's been some discussion starting whether we would go back and remove those, particularly as we're coming through and putting this sidewalk through, there was a neighborhood meeting and there was some feedback from the neighbors, and I can't recall if they liked their wider driveway or wanted it to go back to the narrower one, but that's something we'd be continuing to work on as the project moves through the process.
Thank you.
So it appears for the lots, I'm looking at the lots 1, the 2 lots on the eastern, or is it the northern end of the development, the ones abutting the houses we just looked at, there doesn't seem to be any kind of buffering between the neighborhoods for those 2 houses, whereas there's trees and woods everywhere else except on the edge of the development.
What are the side yard setbacks for R2?
8 feet.
And are they 10 feet in Laketown? I believe they are. I believe they're 10 feet.
The one difficulty of putting the landscaping on the north side of Lot 1 is just the 8-foot setback. You don't have much space in there for the landscaping, whereas these other landscaping, you can see there in the rear yards, but that's something that we can work out with the developer. Terry Hartman's here if you have any questions or comments of the developer as well.
I have the question is, I thought that because these houses were different than the other neighborhood, that there'd be some kind of separation or buffer because the neighborhoods are a little bit different. And that seems to be the case except for 2 of these houses. And those, I guess, is this the northeast corner? Where there's nothing. It appears there.
Terry Hartman, Hartman Communities, 1750 Tower Boulevard. We can take a closer look at that. What's your title when you're
Mayor Pro Tem?
Pro Tem, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem. We can take a closer look at that. When we first proposed this project, we actually had that separation in there, and we had the lots turned 90 degrees. And there was a desire for, was it Hackamore Street that runs east, north and south?
Bridle.
Bridle, to have that, the houses facing, so we had to turn them as a result of the comments from the Planning Commission and the, it's Planning Commission. So now we've got a side yard, yards coming together. There's room in there for adding landscaping between homes, but the condition changed a little bit in terms of the amount of the space there.
It just seems that it's inconsistent. That there should be some kind of formal separation between the houses.
Just for comparison's sake, can you go back to the other map and scroll north? There's a similar neighborhood in Laketown that Terry might be familiar with.
Corner of Carriage and Red
So
Fox.
go up Alphonse.
Oh.
Right up here and Meadow Way. And so you've got single-family homes on the left adjacent directly to twin homes. There's not a lot of buffer there either. But from a aesthetic standpoint, it fits very well.
I think we can take a look at that when we were putting the preliminary plat together to see if we can maximize that and get some more landscaping in there. If we're to continue with the idea of fronting it consistent with what the Planning Commission asked for.
And I understand your point, Council Mayor Pro Tem. I do think that there is a distinction here in terms of back to back versus side by side that makes it.
I understand what happened, and this can't be perfect, but just a question. Any other questions or discussion?
So is Outlot A, is that our parkland delineation?
No, they're paying the park dedication fees.
Oh, they are, okay.
Right. This is kind of going above and beyond that.
But that
This
would be
is
city.
pretty, from a trail connectivity and just a proximity, this is not far from the large park that was added over at the elementary school very recently, correct?
Correct.
So it would make use of that as the community park?
Right, correct.
Thank you.
What's the average expected sale price of the homes?
We're still looking for the builder. I'm the developer proposing the concept. We'll be working with a builder. The demand for this product, you've seen it in Victoria for its active adult association maintained villas. So you've seen Whispering Hills as an example of 350, 375 to maybe 450. Reserve on the Park is 450 to 550, and the Charles Cudd neighborhood I think is above that. So we're still searching for the builder and the exact product, but I would guess to be in the $400,000 to $500,000.
These are not inexpensive homes.
Well,
This is what I'm hearing.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
you add everything up, and that's Victoria's
Yep.
market, even at this tighter density.
Yep.
We're trying as the best we can to work with those densities, but we're also staying solidly within your new zoning.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going the route of the PUD, which would allow us to go a little bit higher density.
Thank you.
Are these going to be considered universal design, single-level living kind of, or are they, I mean, do you have any
In the
basic
discussions we've
concepts?
had with the builders, that we've talked about that, whether that's an important part of this market or not, and we're going to continue to talk to the builders in terms of what's the right floor plan for which of the projects that are selling now in Victoria, what's the best input coming out of those. Universal design was a big part of one of our builders' discussion, but at the same time, storage and needing the basement is another discussion, and it kind of prompts a step in the house, and right away it changes the dynamics completely. So I think we're going to continue to talk about that. You can build in ramps or drop floor joists into the foundation, but it really needs to be a big part of what you're intending to do from the onset.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Pat, this outlot will be city-owned?
That is correct.
Okay, just want to make sure.
I have a question on the wetland remediation. I don't know what that looks like now, but there's a pond there right now? So you're going to eliminate the pond and build houses there?
Yeah, there's a delineated wetland there. The classification, I don't remember right offhand. It's probably seasonally wet. There's not a standing water pond there. There's cattails and the vegetation that indicates the wetland signature, I think is the word that's used. And as we're looking at working around that, we don't make our own decision as to whether we're going to fill that in or not. We look at kind of the public benefit and the public need to whether that's a good idea or not. We're looking at the trail that the comprehensive plan has sort of guided us already, that wants to run right through that wetland, and the public benefit and the public need for berming, public need benefit for landscaping, 8-foot tall berms, all of that coming together right where that poor wetland is. So all of that coming together demonstrates the public need for filling it in.
Okay, these are slabs, they're not basements.
We don't know that for a definite until we assign a builder to this, but we believe it's going to be a mix of full basements and slabs and lookout basements.
And you said the price point is, you don't know it yet, but it's probably in that 500 range.
In the high or low 4s to 5.
It's frustrating that these smaller lots generate that much price point.
Right. It depends on what we need to build into the total package of the house. Yeah. And when you're desiring an association to maintain your property for you, which is really the basis for this product, if you're paying somebody else to do it, we need to make sure that it's efficient as possible for a company or an association to do that. So the consumer is not looking for a large lot to pay somebody else to maintain it. The consumer is actually looking for a pretty efficient maintenance package. So we have to take a close look at that.
So you won't have any trouble selling these, obviously.
Well, if the recent history is those projects are selling pretty fast.
Yeah.
And the good news there is there's a demand for it.
So a couple more questions related to the lowland area there, I'll call it, whatever, the seasonal wetland. So I think in a previous development, not too distant from here, there was some settling issues. And so I'm assuming if it's seasonally wet, there may be some peat or some boggy soils in there. Do you have any concerns about being able to stabilize that to the point where there won't be issues with that here?
Well, we'll bring on the geotechnical team that'll give us some borings in those locations and tell us how deep to go to fill that. And then as they're filling it, they'll be inspecting those compaction lifts as that's coming up. Okay. So I think with our team being supervised by the city's team, there's technology to do that. This was probably not a really old wetland. I think this wetland may have been created with the County Road 11, and it's more of an incidental wetland, and the function and value is not there from a big picture standpoint, that it makes more sense through demonstrating the public benefit to replace this with, and when we do that, we do it on a 2-to-1 basis. So we're buying into a larger created wetland that was created under a microscope for much more function and value than this farmed incidental ditch of a wetland.
So, and then last question on this, looks like about 40% of that area is actually on the adjacent property. So I'm assuming you can't just like build a hard wall and say, here's this and we'll leave the rest the way it is. So are you working with the neighboring property, or how will that all be brought together in the end?
We are working with the neighboring property. The neighboring property owner is Lennar, and their desire through their concept plan that they submitted many years ago was to develop that parcel. They're going to more than likely come to the same conclusion we did with the berming, or the public need for berming, landscaping, the trail to run through there. May very well come to the same conclusion. We wouldn't be required to mitigate their wetland at this point, but they will have to do that when they propose their project.
Okay. Thank you.
We are talking to Lennar to be the builder on this project, as well as several builders.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? One further question, the Outlot A, what kind of trees are those?
Again, they haven't submitted a tree survey. It's not required for part of the sketch plan. They will for for their preliminary plat, but I did walk it, and I didn't notice any maples or oaks. They're mostly basswood and green ash trees.
So this has already seen some preview by Planning Commission and any particular, correct?
Correct. So we had an open house before the Planning Commission. I think 5 residents attended the open house, and then the Planning Commission reviewed and made comments on it as well.
So what's the next step then?
Any any highlights from the Planning Commission comments that you wanted to?
They were again concerned with the amount of trees preserved in the outlot, and the connection between the 2 cul-de-sacs. The plan that was shown to the Planning Commission, there were more homes along in that outlot area, and the trail was essentially between 2 homes. So what Terry did was move the lots farther to the east, open that up so it looks more like an actual public trail as opposed to in between 2 homes. That was the main change. They made the Planning Commission, as Terry mentioned, had some comments about the alignment of the homes on number 1 and 2. Terry made those changes so that they front bridle away as opposed to the new cul-de-sac. Those were another change they made. So now that they've had Planning Commission, public, and City Council comments, they'll come in with a preliminary plat, which will be another public hearing in front of the Planning Commission and City Council.
Thank you.
Any comments? Any further comments? I think we're done with this. You move on to the next item on the agenda.
Thank you.
So we have a discussion and staff report on the South Area Utility Extension. Kara?
Oh, I think we have a wellness.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. It's hard to say, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. This item, the South Area Utility Extension Project, is on the agenda in response to a council workshop that we had on June 25th, where we sought feedback from the City Council as to whether staff should proceed with soliciting proposals for preliminary design services to extend utilities south of Marsh Lake Road, essentially. So current city limits is Marsh Lake Road, and this project would look at extending city sewer and water down along Marsh Lake Road and along County Road 11. So shown in green here would be an extension of a gravity sewer followed by a force main, construction of a lift station, not in this exact location, but generally in this low area, and then extension of city water from the same location up to a property owned by Dave Geshtok. As part of the discussion at the workshop, we also talked about construction of well number 5, which is in process as part of a well siting study in the same area, so that's not included in this preliminary design work. But construction of a street extension from the end of Lake 10 11th to Marsh Lake Road that we had previously discussed with the council is also included in the scope of work that we requested proposals for. One of the drivers associated with why we brought this project forward is this 132-acre parcel owned by Dave Geshtok, and Vogel owns a piece of it as well, is under contract with D.R. Horton for construction of homes. So what their goal would be to seek approvals, so going through sketch plat, preliminary plat, and final plat process over the end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019 with the intent of beginning construction in 2019. In order to do so, the land would have to be annexed and utilities would need to be extended by the city. The Welter parcel, also to the south of these properties, so highlighted in blue here, we're meeting tomorrow, I think it is, with an interested developer that's also looking at the potential for developing this piece of property. So that's a very quick synopsis of what we covered at the workshop. At the workshop, we also covered what the proposed financing would look like for the project if we were to move forward. So in response to the council direction, we did send out a request for proposals. We received proposals from 6 different engineering firms within the city's consulting pool. Those proposals were reviewed by staff for criteria related to what the proposed fees were, experience of the team, understanding of the project, work scope and responsibilities, as well as demonstrated collaboration skills. Interestingly enough, when we got through the rating, all 6 firms submitted really great proposals, really competitive, high-quality proposals. At the end of it all, staff is recommending that we proceed with SRF Consulting Group. As a reminder, SRF is the consultant that's doing the Marsh Lake Road project. Since a portion of this project overlays with their work, there certainly would be some opportunity for some efficiencies. I wouldn't have to be sending plans back and forth between 2 different consultants to settle on alignments for utilities within a proposed roadway, so that nudged them ahead of the pack. So staff is recommending that we authorize SRF Consulting Group. This is what their proposed schedule showed in their proposal. It's generally consistent with what the council had been presented with back at the June workshop, but the preliminary design phase would last. We originally thought we'd be bringing this to the city council 2 weeks ago, so this schedule probably shifts back 2 weeks, but September and October would be the period of time that they would be completing the preliminary design work. The intent of the preliminary design work is to lay out more precisely what the street alignment would be and where the utilities would be located, as well as how stormwater would be addressed, so that we could have an updated cost estimate and identify if we need any easements or right-of-way from property owners. That's really that first step of information we need for everybody to be able to make decisions about how to move forward. I have had an opportunity to meet with the most impacted landowner in the area, the Schmiegs, who are in the audience tonight. They own this property and this property, so we're talking about a project that impacts them in addition to Marsh Lake Road on multiple sides. So we did meet last week to make sure they understood the process and what the next steps would be. So I'm not going to say they were on board, but they understand what the steps are that we're going through and what their role and involvement would be in those discussions. So with that, staff would recommend authorization of SRF to complete preliminary design phase services, but certainly I am available to answer any questions.
Okay, just one question. In this process, what's the order of annexation versus construction simultaneous? you have to annex first? How does that work?
Yeah, we would want to be working through the annexation process while we're doing the design work over the next few months. So Pat has the pleasure of returning from vacation, getting ready to dig into the annexation history and coming up to speed with what that annexation process looks like. But we'd want to be working through all of those things simultaneously.
Can you go back to the larger map there? Yeah, and so when we annexed just north of Marsh Lake Road, we took that whole section all the way to the road. Would we do that again, all the way down to County Road 10, or how would we approach that?
So certainly that's something that Pat's going to have an opportunity to weigh in on here as he gets settled in. But what we had talked about with the interim community development consultant was looking at annexing all the way down to County Road 10.
Just that section, not all
Correct.
the way over? Okay.
Correct. Yeah. The Schmiegs also had some questions about whether we would have to annex their entire property or could we just annex a portion of it. And certainly that's something that Pat will have to look into once he's up to speed on annexation and our agreement.
What's the probable date or time frame that we'd be annexing
Sometime in the next 6 months.
that quick?
Yeah.
So generally, annexation has taken place at the request of the property owner, kind of in conjunction with a development plan. Do we have any history, or how do we move if the property owner does not want to be annexed?
So in the case of Marsh Lake Road, let me go to an aerial. The area south of Wasserman Lake, the city was first approached by this landowner and developer for annexation and for extension of utilities. And the planning staff at that time made a determination that it would be most appropriate to annex all the way out through Marsh Lake Road, all the way down to this location. So there were property owners who were annexed as part of that process in accordance with our annexation agreement that hadn't petitioned or requested annexation. Our agreement allows us to annex it regardless of whether we have an applicant from a landowner.
And that's that state level orderly annexation agreement that goes back, what, 30 or 40 or 50 years?
Yeah, I think the original agreement was dated 1973. It was updated in 76. There's been some amendments, and that's the history that we're all working together to pull together for Pat.
Is there any negative, any reason why a property owner would oppose annexation?
So I'm starting to talk outside of my area of expertise.
You're doing great.
I've witnessed people express concern about what the impact would be on their taxes. That came up at our neighborhood meeting last week, and there were people in attendance who had been annexed with that previous annexation and noted that they didn't notice any significant change in anything when they were annexed. That's as much as I know, unless the city attorney has anything.
But before this happens, we would have done research, and we would know exactly how to reassure these people what was going to happen.
Once
on
Pat
the taxes. This would not be any guess whatsoever.
Correct. Once Pat has an opportunity to get up to speed, we'll have all that information readily available.
Are there assessments associated with putting in this infrastructure?
Under the city's assessment policy, this part up here where we're constructing a street and extending, really it's the street. With the construction of the street through this section, we would have to be taking a look at our assessment policy to see how that would apply. So it wouldn't be a reconstruction of a street, it'd be construction of a new street. So under the council's adopted policy, we would be having to calculate potential assessments. Obviously, if we're also acquiring right-of-way from the property owner for the roadway, I'm sure there would be some level of discussion between the city and the landowner about how that all comes together. That preliminary design phase work allows us to be able to actually answer those questions. So we would know where the road would go. We would know which properties for sure would be affected. We would have cost estimates that we could do some calculations, and then that would also obviously come back to the city council for direction before we would move forward with any next steps.
But Kara, the rest of the cost of the trunk would be paid from hookup charges?
Correct. So the lift station, the force main, and the trunk water main extension would be paid through connection fees collected from developers.
From our Comp 2040 plan, does our commercial retail area go to the railroad tracks?
Correct. So we would then have sanitary sewer available to where the draft 2040 comprehensive plan shows commercial and higher density. So the sewer line would need to be extended underneath the train tracks as part of them pursuing any development in this area. The trunk water line would run through the development. Typically, you're going to want to try to route that through streets. If for some reason we had landowners moving more quickly down here, we could look at extending the water along County Road 11, but we have a developer looking at developing a huge portion of it sooner than later. So,
what portion of these utilities would be developer responsibility versus city taxpayer responsibility? I'm
going to go to my staff report. So at the council workshop, Kelly had put together a whole financing package associated with this. So I'm going to go to that presentation so that I don't have to guess what I'm talking about. And the finance director is still here if you have questions. But essentially, the project would be primarily funded using revenue collected from the development of lots within these proposed development areas. So she had put together an estimate of how much funding would be generated from 500 homes out of these two parcels. So this one we had speculated as being 250 to 300 units. This would be another 250 units. That certainly doesn't include fees generated by the commercial area, which would also be generating revenue. But essentially, the project would be funded from utility funds.
So when we extended utilities down to Marsh Lake Road, that was something on the order of $2 million. And how many lots generated that revenue?
It was like 1.2 million, right?
I can't do math that quickly in my head. But essentially, these fees that were collected from all of these lots were going towards.
Yeah, just trying to understand how many lots that. Do you have any idea how many lots there are there?
Well, and it was everything over here as well, because
Yeah.
that backside of Carriage couldn't even be developed
Right.
until all of that.
Correct.
Until they came around the top. I mean, there's
And so
1,000.
where I'm going with this is that, all right, if that was roughly 2 million, I was trying to understand the number of lots there, and you have potentially, was it 4 million, 2 million for each down below, and so we have to have double the density essentially to cover.
Yeah, so she had 500 homes would generate $845,000 in water availability charges and $1.125 million in water core fees. Was there a summary table in my staff report?
But am I reading that correctly, that it's 1.97 million for water and 1.97 million for sewers, so it's a total
Correct.
of almost 4 million?
That's what I was looking for.
So 4 million is a good round number.
Nice little summary at the bottom.
4.7.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So
I just needed to zoom.
of the 4.7 million, 1.6 is coming from existing reserves. So we're going to deplete our reserves by 1.6 million.
Correct.
And how much is that going to leave in our reserves?
We've got about 3 million in the water fund right now, so we have at least half that amount.
So half our water fund reserves are going to go away with this, but we'll have plenty of reserves left.
And where's the next big jump that we would have to make?
That So once we have utilities extended down to this location, then we're going to be back in the oversized situation where where as developers are extending utilities out from this direction, we'll be oversizing pipes. So we'll have to fund that oversizing like we did for a number of years through this, as plats were coming through this area. We don't need another big capital investment, i.e. another big lift station in this area.
So can you go back to the more broad view, please? And so come back up here to the top. And so to what Councilmember Striegel just said, we couldn't get to the Lake Town 10th and 11th until we came around the south end.
Correct.
Is there a situation here where we couldn't get to, so for instance, we've had a sketch plat for Marsh Lake just south of, yep, right there. How would we get sewer to there? And if you go down to the south side of Marsh Lake, if that suddenly came in, do we have to come all the way across this area of land to get to that side?
Sure.
Or is there another main that comes down?
So this parcel would be served by existing sewer and water that's on the north side of Marsh Lake Road. Generally, the comprehensive plan shows all of this sewer flowing back to the lift station and back to the north. We did, through the comprehensive plan update, look at the possibility, let's say for some reason, and we have no indication that this is a thing, but if these landowners came forward and said they wanted to develop and didn't want to wait for the pipe to come all the way back through here, we would be looking at a smaller lift station, and then we'd be running force main back up through here, but it's at a much smaller scale than what we're talking about for a major lift station that carries our entire South Rose area.
Sewers are sized to handle that volume?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we did that, are we kind of going through no man's land again there to go northeast, and does that then become the city's tab?
It's this section that runs right through here,
Right.
next to water. These people have an existing 201 system. This parcel's developable, I would imagine.
201 system?
They have, what's the best way to say this in English? So they're connected to like a community system that goes into a community drain field, and then that drain
So
field.
it's community septic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And so what, again, back to the question is, the city would be responsible for the cost of infrastructure that would go southwest from basically from Marsh Lake Road and 43 intersection down until we connect it up to the whatever development.
So if this all developed, you'd probably have a gravity main that came up through here, but you'd potentially have a lift station and a force main coming back up through here that might have to be funded.
So eventually we recover all this through fees.
Correct.
But is there a cash flow issue in building this out with either the water fund or the sewer fund?
So that was what Kelly had went through and concluded that we could proceed, but I will let her speak to that.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Yeah, so what I had done is I had looked at what we had in our reserves versus what we would potentially need to bond for. So with the extending the trunk water main, we have enough to use reserves for that. Well number 5, we would need to bond for just because we would be accelerating the timing on that. We had originally thought we could maybe pay for reserves with that if it was pushed out a few years, but with it being pushed up and the building of well 2.5, we'd have to bond for that. But we still would have enough in reserves for cash flow and other projects we have planned for the water fund. And then for the sewer improvements, we would have enough to do about half of the $2 million with reserves, and then we'd want to finance the other portion of it. And then the streets, we would need to probably do bond financing.
So are all these, is all this bond financing, this debt, is that in your 5 and 10 year projections that we just were talking about?
The water and sewer portions are not, because the long-term financial plan we're looking at, we're concerned primarily with tax impact, and these would not impact taxes. The street portion I don't have in there yet. It's kind of a small amount, so we'd maybe look for another option to do maybe an interfund loan on that. Not quite sure on that, but I don't have a financial impact on that one yet.
What our total debt that we look at when we look out 5 or 10 years, there's a total debt number.
Yep.
Are these numbers incorporated in that total debt projection?
I don't believe they are, just because the project was not certain yet, so
Okay,
I don't
so-
think they're in that.
So the total, we're missing 3 million?
Yeah, I'd have to double check on that one.
So back to my original question, because I always think of this as being basically expense that becomes part of the development expense. So I think when we put this together, we didn't have any specific development interest. We were just looking at if the city bore the cost uniquely and whatever happened independent of that. But if we're now hearing from a developer that there's interest in developing some of the very land that this would serve, how much of this actually does come onto the city versus how much would the developer pay directly? Or is that these revenues come in on a lot-by-lot basis?
So a portion of the fees get paid with development, and then another portion of the fees get paid at the time of building permit. But it's the developer and the building permit point where we would collect that revenue to pay for these extensions.
So this total build-out would be how many years before everything's developed?
Of course, that's a market question. I mean, right now we're doing, what did you say? We did in permits this year?
We're planning 110. We're planning for
We
110.
did 198 last year and probably 160 this year.
The other thing that's happening that we talked about in the workshop, and I don't have that slide handy, but we're also starting to run out of available developable land within the current city limits. I could entertain all of you by going parcel by parcel, but the developable land that remains within the current city limits either is owned by property owners who aren't interested in selling their land for development, or they're parcels that have some particular challenges with them that have caused them to remain undeveloped for some period of time. So what we've discussed at a staff level is that barring annexation, you know, and you would run the math on one of your projections of what would happen with the various fund accounts if we weren't continuing to receive revenue through development. I don't remember if that's on here.
It seems like we should have, maybe, before we move forward with, we would want to see that. I think that model that says what number of years of lot inventory do we have, what investment do we have to make, what happens if we don't, you know, I think we just want to see those kind of financial scenarios laid out.
I think the last,
Because this model shows that we're gonna have to bond over $3 billion, which is going to incur interest of about would we use 15 or 20-year bonds, or 25?
we would use 15 years.
15-year bonds, so we'd have 1.2 million, so we've got a total cash outlay of 4.3 million that we're gonna expend in the short term. So how long is it gonna take for that money to come back to us in fees from the developers?
Well, the scenario I ran in the far column shows interest for 8 years. So it would be our hope that within 8 years we would have enough in there to pay back the bonds and then avoid approximately $400,000 in interest.
So I think the model Councilor Striegel was referring to is to give us a little more comfort on what the build out is, and so we understand the time frame and what the cash flow implications are.
But we also have an example related to that that we can compare to, and that is the build-out of Lake Town. If you go back to 2010, in the 8 years, it's about 500 houses. And so we have a good model to base this on, I think.
Well, and you could compare the development south of Wasserman Lake too, the
Yep.
Lake Wasserman Woods, all of those
Yeah,
developments.
that's what I meant, that whole section.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
This has been done before, it's just that
Yeah.
the numbers are big, so.
Well, and it's been 5-6 years since we did that, so I think it's
Yeah.
worth a refresh. It's good information, it's good work.
Yeah, at the workshop in June, we did have, the landowners were here and D.R. Horton was here. They call or email every 2 weeks to find out whether we're moving forward with preliminary design, so they are indicating that they're looking to get going. So it's past speculative, at least in the case of the Gastroc.
So to that point, what was that motion again?
I'll make a motion to authorize SRF Consulting Group to complete preliminary design phase for services for the South Area street and utility improvements in an amount not to exceed $34,711.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Just in terms of next steps, then, once they complete that preliminary design work, we'll have actual cost estimates. We'll be working with Kelly to come up with more refined financial projections, meeting with all the affected property owners, and then it would come back to council to get authorization for final design. That's where you start spending more significant engineering dollars, so that's why we phase these, so that we don't get too far in the process before you have all the information you need to be able to make a decision that you actually want to keep moving forward.
So, my standard question always at this point is, what's the shelf life of this preliminary design work, this study, so that in the event that it didn't move forward in a really quick manner, is this money still?
Yeah, this would be somewhat comparable to a feasibility study. So you would, if, let's say, the developers decided they weren't interested and the council decided to not move forward, then you would still have this information and be able to index it forward, several years. We specifically held off on doing the topographic survey until the final design phase because of that costs a little bit more money and it has a shelf life. So we didn't want to include that in the initial phase of work for that very reason.
And do we have, from this development interest, do we have is somebody watching at home going, okay, I'm going to go start writing checks now in terms of moving forward with land acquisition to actually?
Yeah, so D.R. Horton has a purchase agreement for the Gastroc Vogel parcels. They're about to start spending engineering dollars on tree surveys and concept development and soil borings and all of those things. So I imagine they're going to be watching if they aren't, or they'll be calling tomorrow. Pat and I have a meeting scheduled with them. That's the other people. That's the interested developer who doesn't have an option yet on the parcel to the south, but we're meeting with Horton this week or next week.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else? I think this ends our discussion. And we're moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is staff report on the Wellness Facility Advisory Committee. And that's Doug.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor Funk got a letter from Rod Franks of the county asking that the city of Victoria suggest to them who from the city council of Victoria would serve on the advisory committee for the crisis facility. I confess I don't know a lot about what the crisis facility is. Somebody here might know a lot more about that, but they're putting together a committee. There'll be two neighborhood representatives, county social services staff, 2 of those, Ridgeview Medical Center staff, law enforcement representatives, local mental health providers, consumer representatives, elected officials, 2, one from Victoria and one from Chaska, 2, and a school district staff and a health plan representative. And they're asking you to designate somebody from this city council to serve on the committee. The committee is an advisory committee that will be doing work between September of this year and September of 2020. So it would be good to have somebody that would be on the council through 20. So they're asking that you indicate to the county who you would like them to appoint.
Is there any chance that we can defer this till after the election? You're going to have 2 new people sitting up here in January.
I did not ask that question. I can ask them, but they were hoping to start in September. I think that's why they're asking you to do it now.
I did speak with the mayor earlier today, and he did say he would be interested in being on this committee. He just threw his hat in the ring.
What about you, Counselor?
You know, I personally, I didn't want to be on it. And that's why I asked him if he wanted.
I would say if no one else volunteered, I would have volunteered, but if the mayor's interested, do we have to?
I think you could delay it to the next meeting. I think that's timely enough, but I don't know after the election.
Yeah, why don't we at least, give the mayor an opportunity to speak directly? I appreciate the input from Councilmember Gregory, but I guess I think if we could wait 1 meeting, that would probably be a good use. And then if it's a temporary assignment until there's somebody new, then maybe we can speak to that at the time too. Anybody disagree with that approach?
No, I think they were just appointing somebody till 2020 is what they were looking for, right?
Yes.
I think
Do we
so.
need to table this, or are we good?
I think,
Just direct me to put it on this next meeting, that's fine.
yes.
Like a motion to table this item until the September, whatever the date is for the first meeting in September.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of postponing this motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. That's the end of that discussion. Next item on the agenda is the second quarter financial report.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So we have the second quarter financial report for 2018 in the packet. This was reviewed by the Finance Committee at their last meeting, which was about a week or so ago. So I'm going to go right to the general fund page. Should be page 1. And there aren't any big surprises in the general fund at this point. Our property tax revenue is coming in slightly ahead of where we had projected, and that's largely due to people prepaying their property taxes last year to take advantage of the elimination of not the elimination, but the limitation on property tax and income tax deductions. So I think that's why we've had a higher amount coming in for that. Building permit revenue is also coming in steady. I have a separate page on that, so I won't talk a lot about that on this particular page. But we're where we are, if not a little bit ahead of where we'd expect to be for revenues. And then in terms of expenditures, we're pretty much right on target, very close to what we'd project to be for budget. And we have made the operating transfers that were budgeted for the year already. The next page shows the city's building permit revenue. I'm just going to zoom this up a little bit. And there's a purple line that runs through the center of the chart that shows what our budget should be for each month, and you can see that for 4 out of the 6 months we were ahead of budget. The orange line that kind of goes all over the place shows what we actually received for revenue last year in total, and then the bars reflect monthly building permit revenue broken down into the different categories of revenue. So the blue bar portion represents new home permit revenue. The red is for commercial permits, and that would be for the Mount Olivet project. The yellow is for the miscellaneous other permits we get, and then the green is the plan check fees. So we've taken in almost $500,000 through the first 6 months of the year compared to a total budget of $620,000 for the year. So we should easily meet our budget for the year. The next report is for the Victoria Recreation Center, and similar to the general fund, no big surprises on the budget for revenues. Those are coming in right where we'd expect them to, and expenditures are trending a little bit lower right now, and that's mainly due to maintenance that we'll do on the facility that will be done after the first 6 months of the year. The chart at the bottom shows how we're doing for revenue and the different charges for service. The school district has fully paid their lease for the year. And then in terms of memberships and daily passes, we've already received $102,000 out of the $135,000 budgeted for the year.
Do those come in fairly level throughout the course of the year, or are a lot of those paid up through full year? How do we expect that to fill in over the next 4 months?
With the memberships, they come in fairly steadily throughout the year. We do have an influx at the beginning of the year with New Year's resolutions, but we also defer a portion of the annual revenue as the year goes on. So if somebody pays for a membership in October, we only recognize 25% of that amount, and we put the other percent in, and it'll be accounted for in the following year. So just because we've taken in 102 so far doesn't mean we're going to double that, because it's going to go down because of that accrual. But we'll easily meet our projection for the year.
Thank you.
So the gold bars, excuse me, the gold bars, that's the budget for the full year or the budget for the 2 quarters?
It's the budget for the full year.
So we're going to beat the budgets handily, the way it looks.
I would expect so, yes.
Just curious, what is that, cricket? Is that a ventilation? What is that?
Yeah. Something's chirping over by the city attorney and the city manager.
What are you guys doing under?
So they got a hamster over there.
I didn't hear it.
Okay.
There it is.
Yeah.
It hurt us and stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so page 4, 5, and 6 show the city's utility funds, water fund, sewer fund, and stormwater fund. Again, we're trending where we'd expect to be for revenue. One area that we're below budget is for water availability charges. We budgeted that we would have taken in about $94,000 by now. And that number is dependent on plats being approved, and we just haven't had any plats approved yet this year. So we're low on that, but we are making up for it in water connection fees, and that would be for building permits on already approved developments. In terms of operating expenses, they are trending a little bit lower than what we expect. And I expect we'll probably come in a little bit below budget for the year, particularly for water. For the sewer fund, similar to the water fund, we have the same issue with the sewer availability charges. Since we haven't approved any new plats, that number is 0 right now. But we are making up some ground in the sewer connection charges. Budget's a little bit closer for this fund, but I still think we'll be lower than budget for expenditures when the final year-end numbers come in. And then for stormwater, we don't have any connection fees for stormwater, so it's strictly just based on the quarterly utility bills. So those are right where we'd want those to be. And we are trending lower on expenses. However, a lot of our work is done in the last half of the year, so we should be doing fine in that fund as well.
Before we move on, quick, I saw the blast or the flash news, whatever, about water demand this last few weeks of dryness straining the system, does that drive any expense or any costs, or does it accelerate any expenses that we were planning to make sure that doesn't become a problem?
It reinforces the need for well 2.5 and well number 5.
Increases revenue.
So fill up the coffers, we're gonna spend the money.
Yeah,
So
we'll
is
have
that a
higher
supply-
electric and,
Is that a supply challenge or a storage problem or general both?
Supply,
Okay. So we're not outgrowing the tank that we just,
correct.
okay.
And it's just a reminder. You do not need to water your lawn every other day, even when it's dry.
At one point in time, we had, and I know it's a little off budget discussion, but maybe just put it as a footnote for, or maybe an item for the next meeting. We had, at one point, formed a water efficiency or a water usage, I don't know, committee or advisory group. I think Councilmember Vogt and I were both on it. There's been little to no demand for that work because we've been running so far behind our trend line that we had been on, so consequently we haven't met as a group. But again, to your point, it's a wake-up call, it's a reminder. So, and I think the reason I bring it up now is that a big piece of that effort was to be on education, right? To find a way to not have to spend millions of dollars, especially if it's a lot of water that runs down the storm drains, if people are overwatering, et cetera, et cetera. So we may want to look at kind of rerunning that flag up.
Right. Well, that news flash was interesting to see that. I think it said that in June we used almost twice as much water as we did in March. I mean, was that roughly? Do you remember? That's about what it said. So
Like 4
that's
times as
irrigation water. I mean, so that's where it's going.
I mean, June to March, I would expect it to be double, but it was quite a bit.
Yeah, it was March to oh, Ann's not here. I just went to look for it. Between, March to August, it was like 4 times the use. I mean, our wells and pumps were running around the clock to keep up with the demand, and sometimes it's okay to let your lawn be a little bit drier when the temperatures are consistently over 90 degrees day in and day out.
So do we have are we going to encounter a problem if this dryness gets into September?
The concern that we have is if we have enough supply as long as all of our systems are working, but if one of our well pumps were to go down or we were to encounter an issue with one of our wells, then we would have to go into mandatory water restrictions beyond what are already in place just to keep up with making sure we have the minimum amount of water to meet supply for non-lawn purposes and fire protection.
When is 2.5 going to be done?
The project is currently out for bids, so we're opening bids on September 20th. So then the council will be looking at awarding a contract to construct that well over the winter. So the intent would be to have it online by next season.
So that's going to be under, what park is that, Katie?
Katy Hills Park.
Katy Hills Park, which is right over there,
Yeah.
across the highway.
Yep.
And we're also working on the next well, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So
the well
we need to
siting
keep doing those.
Yeah, the well siting study that the council authorized some time ago, we slowed down a little bit on some of the work we were doing with that as these parcels started to come into play for development. It really makes more sense to try to site some of those potential locations in conjunction with the developer so we don't go drill a hole in a place that ends up being a road. So we'll certainly be talking with them about that, but we need both. So, and part of that's growth. So
We can, all right. I guess
2.5 will cover at length at the second meeting in September when we bring it forward for
funding.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Any questions on any of the utility fund budget to actual? Okay, then there's a report in here showing information from the second quarter utility billing. About the only thing that is notable on here is the the water pump versus build statistics for the second quarter of 2018. We pumped about 10.5 million gallons more than we billed out, which is about a 13.5% difference. So we're working on that. We suspect we've got a meter reading issue going on. So we're going to continue to monitor that. The other thing that might be coming into play is that we read the meters on about June 24th, and so that's where the consumption piece ends. But you know, the gallons pumped goes through June 30th, so there was 6 days in there where we could have potentially had, you know, over 1 million gallons a day going out for consumption. So if that's the case, we'd make up that difference on the third quarter.
So it's 6 out of roughly 90 days, or in other words,
Yeah.
6-ish%.
Right.
What did that number look like last quarter? What was our differential last quarter?
Last quarter, it was under 10%, which is our goal.
Was the other way?
It wasn't, we didn't overbill, but it was below 10% underbilled.
So we've had 2 months, 2 quarters in a row underbilled?
Well, we're always going to be underbilled because we pump water, but we need to use some of it in production. And then there's always water that is unaccounted for through either leaks or hydrant flushing, things like that. So
But at what point is this material, where you have two quarters, this is 13%, last quarter was 10%, so we've had, so what's the total gallons that we've underbilled then for the year? It must be a cumulative number that's getting material.
And that's why we're monitoring it to find out what it is, if it's a meter reading issue or if it's simply a timing issue. So we're working on the meter reading piece of it right now. And then when we get to the readings at the end of September, that'll give us a better idea too of if that consumption piece goes up quite a bit, which we suspect it will. So
Because we don't think this is an infrastructure issue where we have leaks all over the place.
no, we don't think it's a leak issue. So
If I look at it from is it fair if I look at it from a revenue standpoint and say we billed out almost $610,000, that would have been about $60,000 to $70,000 higher if we had 100% billed? I know we can't, but is that roughly the magnitude we're talking about?
not totally, because about,
Billing rate scales.
well, there's a fixed, or there's a minimum charge to a base charge. So a portion of that is the base charge. So I don't know offhand what proportion of the water is base versus consumption charge just off the top of my head, but it's probably in the neighborhood of 30% of it is fixed and 70% is consumption for this particular quarter.
So maybe it's 35,000 or something in that neighborhood. Still, it's a number.
Yeah, it's significant. It's, if anytime you're over 10%, you definitely want to look into it and see why it's.
I presume there's a spreadsheet somewhere in the depths of this building that goes back a year or two as a base and accumulates quarters.
Yeah, we have the,
So what's your net overbilling or underbilling for the past year or 2 or 3 to see if we've got a real problem?
yeah, we have it going back to like 2009, so.
Okay, so what's our net over, under, or billing?
Oh, what's the cumulative?
Cumulative.
I haven't done that because we've never really been this out of whack, so, but I can definitely take a look at that and see.
I mean, even if we just went back a few years and see what's happened, if we have anything material. I mean, it should be very close to zero, because all these ups and downs should be offsetting each other over time.
Well, it should be, but as meters age, they also tend to slow down because of sediment buildup, so you're not capturing all the water that's going through. So there are a lot of things that can impact how much water you're billing versus how much water you pumped.
But the first one is there's 6 days that aren't accommodated on
And
this.
that's-
we
Yeah.
understand
6 or
that.
7% right there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, it's kind of a monitor and
Right.
report back
Yep.
in my mind.
The next page shows the city's cash balances by fund, and no surprises here. We did receive a portion of our tax settlement, so there are a few funds that are negative for the year, but they'll catch up with the different property tax settlements we get. This page shows the city's cash and investments and the different metrics as of June 30th. So you can see the allocation the city has and that we are in limits for the different types we can have and how much is allowed. We also meet our 7% concentration limit. You can see with the maturities that we try and stretch those out, going up to 5 years. With the current interest rate environment, I've trying to keep the investments in the up to 2 to 3 year range just because they seem to be going up. And we're meeting our minimum current amount per our investment policy. Then you can see at the bottom the interest rates. We're gradually getting now to where we're starting to see a little bit of a return on that. So the budget through the first 6 months of the year is $97,000, and we've taken in $122,000 so far.
Well done.
This page shows the status of the city's capital improvement plan items, and I won't go through all of them, but let's see what would be. The ones that are done are the replacing the portable radios for the fire department. The parking improvements we're just wrapping up. And then we've done the Bobcat, Toolcat utility vehicle. Most of these we're still working on. And then this last page shows the city's bonds outstanding as of the beginning of the year and as of June 30th. So we've paid principal of about $1.8 million so far, interest of about $300,000. And then when we talked about this first quarter report, there was a request to add the debt per capita numbers and the net tax ported debt numbers. So I've included those. You can see that the debt per capita is reduced from 2,704 to 2,488, and the net tax ported debt has gone down from about 10.4 million to about 10.1 million. And
looking at the graph, the purple represents additional debt we anticipate.
That's correct.
So getting back to our pursuant to the previous discussion on the expansion of utilities, is this all debt, including utility debt?
So this does not include the South Lake extension yet, and it does not include the Wasserman Lake Park. But
So the utility debt was that with 2019 or 20, is that it? When would that happen?
probably 2020.
Okay, so 2020, what's 3 million? That's so that tip there, that little tip would be a little higher. Would be, well, we'd probably go up to that line.
Yeah, I suspect it would be up close to the
Okay.
30 million.
Thank you.
And that is it for the report.
Steady forward.
No other comments? We'll move on to the next item. Thank you. And now we have the unfinished business. We have the Marsh Lake Road project, and that's Kara, what we've been waiting for.
Yes, so members of the audience.
Yeah, we thank you all for waiting.
Patiently waiting.
Should have moved this up in the order.
We should have moved it up.
Yep. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, the next item on the agenda is the Marsh Lake Road Improvement Project. As was noted under open forum, we've been at this for quite some time. So I went back through the records, and in March of 2015 was when the City Council identified Marsh Lake Road as a priority to see it improved. A year later, in March of 2016, after ongoing discussion with the county, the city and county entered into a joint powers agreement and authorized SRF to begin preliminary design. So that was March of 2016. In 2017, we provided the City Council with an update at a workshop after some preliminary design work had been completed and resident meetings had been held. And at that point, we were looking at a preliminary typical section that I might as well just go and open quickly to accommodate what would be a 4-lane road. Oops. So at the time, the county was wanting to preserve right-of-way for what would be able to be expanded into a 4-lane road. So this typical section here shown on the top had 130 feet of right-of-way, 1 lane in each direction, but we had this big giant 41-foot wide median because the intent at that time was when the road needed to be 4 lanes, you would widen it to the middle. So you essentially would have been building the road from the outside in. And when we got through that process, there was a lot of questions raised about whether or not we really needed a 4-lane road. Was that something that was really necessary? And at the time, the comp plan process was just coming underway, so we all put the brakes on everything. So we had SRF stop work while the county and the cities worked on updating their comprehensive plan. So the county took a step back, updated their traffic projections based on 2040 comprehensive plans, looked at some ultimate build-out scenarios associated with traffic, and at the they finally reached the point in that work a few months ago where they said, you're right, we don't need a 4-lane. So we don't have to grab right away for a 4-lane. We don't have to plan for a 4-lane. We can just proceed with the 2-lane. So then the next question became, okay, what does the 2-lane section look like? So what I finally have here is what would be a county preferred proposed typical section for Marsh Lake Road. So 120 feet of right-of-way, accommodating 1 lane in each direction and an 18-foot wide median that would be of a width that would be wide enough to allow there to be some landscaping in the center of the median.
So why is this county preferred when nowhere else along this road does it look like that? And why can't it look like Pioneer Trail?
So what I put together in the council packet is a matrix. I need to zoom back out so that we're not trapped. A matrix that had been prepared by our consultant that looks at the different advantages and disadvantages of an undivided roadway versus a divided roadway. So divided would have a median. There's a slight variant in right-of-way width, but the corridor function starts to change when you have a divided roadway with a median. So the emphasis starts to shift on safety and mobility. The road with the median can certainly carry significantly more traffic, but that didn't end up being a driver in the decision-making process because we aren't anticipating nearly the levels of traffic that had historically been talked about. So traffic wasn't necessarily the driver.
What number did they come up with?
The 2040 comprehensive plan, which is restrained by what Met Council anticipates to be growth, is more of like on the 6,000 cars per day magnitude. They did run a full build-out scenario that had something on the order of 16,000 cars per day, but everybody thinks that scenario was too high.
And what would be the timing on that?
Full build-out. So the county's built out.
50 years?
Yeah. Well, Victoria's built out, Waconia's built out.
Go back to the map, please. The geographic, what you were showing for Lake Town earlier, but expand it back to show that whole road. All right, so what I don't understand is if you look at Marsh Lake Road, and all right, now they're projecting 6,000 to 16,000 cars along there. Now move all the way over Pioneer Trail, all the way to the... How are you going to get 16,000 cars through that roundabout and across the railroad tracks?
Well, you're not.
That's my point. So
That's
why
why they
are you
did it.
building this out along those
So,
lines?
so that's what I was trying to say, is that traffic isn't the driver. So I included the statistic about what the difference is between the traffic capacity, but it isn't the driver, because we just aren't anticipating 20,000 cars on that road. It's somewhere between 6,000 and whatever thousand when 50 years from now, way out in the future.
And so jumping in, sorry, I'm gonna just jump in here because we talked earlier about 40-ish to maybe 50-ish year road design life. So even an urban undivided 2-lane road would provide sufficient for capacity through its entire design life.
Correct. So capacity isn't the driver. So what becomes the driver are the other factors.
Citizen preference?
So, okay, I've spent, what have we spent, 3 years together now talking about this? And I'm the city engineer, so you're all the elected officials, I'm the city engineer. I have to come up with a recommendation for you that I think is going to provide you with, not just you, the community of Victoria, with the best road for the 50 years that it's going to be in existence. Historically, a lot of the county roads here don't have medians, but when you start to look at the new roads that are getting built, you're starting to see medians become a much more common occurrence with what's getting constructed. And that has to do with, in some cases, capacity, but in other cases, some of the other ancillary advantages associated with having a median. One that I think is probably something you've all been thinking about a lot lately is simply pedestrian crossing. So when you have to, run across County Road 11 without a place to stop, as that traffic increases, it becomes less safe. So having a median provides some safety benefit, both from reducing conflict points. When you have 2-lane traffic on an extreme case where you run the risk of cars driving into each other, like Doug and I were talking today about Highway 12 west of, like where 394 turns into Highway 12. That's an extreme example of, hearing in the news about head-on collisions. Now that's an example of a road that has way too much capacity for being a 2-lane undivided road. But certainly having a median reduces the conflict points. Improve pedestrian crossings, and then there's a traffic calming element associated with it when you have the lanes separated and you have the landscaping in the middle. Everybody likes to ask me, what can we do to make cars drive slower? And building County Road 11, building County Road 18, 43, Pioneer Trail, all creates an environment where cars zip over the speed limit. On Pioneer Trail the other day, this is a few months ago, I was driving it. It's posted 45. I was driving it to see how it would compare to what would be here, and it would be very similar. I think if we recommend that the county proceed with 2-lane undivided, I think it's going to look a lot like Pioneer Trail is what the outcome ends up being. But I'm driving it at 45 miles an hour, and people are passing me and giving me dirty looks because how dare I go 45 miles an
Pioneer
hour?
Trail seems really wide to me. How wide is it?
I haven't actually measured it, but generally it's probably consistent with what the state aid standards would be.
Are we speaking about the area in front of Town Course, Chaska Town
Yeah,
Course?
I mean,
there?
it just feels like it's a fast road because it's so wide.
Yep.
We have that measured.
I measured it. I measured county roads all across Carver,
Okay.
Calvert County. I've been out there with my kids. I'll pull it up.
Is there anybody in the audience who's in favor of a median? Just curious.
No. I would say that we're not aware of all the different things that come into planning the road, and so it causes.
Come on up, Scott. It's not Scott, Jeremy.
I'm Jeremy Rock. I live on Marsh Lake Road, 5925 Marsh Lake Road. So from my perspective, there's an overlay to the whole project because of the agricultural use that's still going on.
and that needs to be taken into account primarily because they've been there for almost 200 years doing that. Barring any agricultural use, as a group, I think we are still unsure of what is it that we have to choose from, because we're not sure where the priorities lie. Like, what do you define first? Do you define median or no median before you define where are the access points across that median? Do we have to always turn right out of our driveways in our residential district in the middle if we have a median, because we can't do a median if we're going to put any brakes in the median? What goes in the median?
Truck that you have.
What goes in the median? How is it landscaped? Are there trees? Are there shrubs? Is there nothing? What is the cost of maintaining the median? Do we have a curb on the outside of the road, or do we have an eased shoulder so that you could actually drive wider than the curb without destroying things? I mean, all of those unknowns give us a very difficult task to be able to come up here and say, carte blanche, yes, we're in favor of a median, or yes, we're in favor of no median, because there are so many things in play. From a safety standpoint, I appreciate that Kara is explaining to us that a median helps the safety in terms of traffic going down that road, and I also appreciate that it has a traffic calming effect. But that being said, we cannot have a median on at least the eastern half of the road where there's significant farming going on for decades down the road, potentially. So I don't know if there's really an answer from us as a whole, because we have differing opinions on the details, and if you prioritize those points in a different order, then we come up with a different answer. You know, first is safety, second is access, because no one wants to come out of their driveway, take a right, and then look for a place to do a U-E to go left. That doesn't really help anybody. Third would be speed, and, you know, as Kara eloquently mentioned, you know, this is a traffic calming feature, and speed-wise, how else can we control speed other than having a speed limit? And then we get into the discussion of, well, we don't have the authority to set a speed limit, and is it enforceable and all of that? Whether it's enforceable or not, we want to maintain some control of speed, even if it is, just like it is all over our county and our state, plenty of different cities that put up speed limit signs that may or may not be totally enforceable, but yet they're observed by 95% of the drivers that drive by. And fourth in that priority list is the beautification part. Like, great, we'd like it to look good, but that's kind of last priority. So we're not overly concerned about, you know, let's make it beautiful, and then, oh, well, if we have to turn right out of our driveway, that's fine as long as I have a pretty tree, you know. So I don't really know if we could overall answer universally as a group of residents along the road, other than to say we have a lot of questions still about how do we prioritize these things.
So, Kara, what would you say we are at in terms of stage in the process? Because I thought of a lot of those same things, like, would there still be resistance to a median if we worked with the people who are actually interfacing with it and saying, if you put a curb cut access here and a median opening of X width there that facilitated the movement of equipment, would that change the answer?
Well, I think we saw the answer to that from the Schmieg family in Julie's email that you all got, that for them, even if you had a humongous opening in that median, the reality is that we're still working with a 60-foot-long train of implements being brought up and down the road for that area where there's farming going on. So I think for practical purposes, what Julie has represented is that any median at all, from basically where they access the Hunt Club to do the hay baling there, all the way out to where Victoria Drive meets Marsh Lake Road, there really is nowhere along there that a median does not cause a problem for them. My perspective is further to the west, because once you get over the creek and to the west, then we have residential driveways and we have more of a safety concern. And Scott has expressed the same kind of concern, just how wide is that access cut in the median, so that I have a clear view, because I don't want to pull out to turn left and still be limited now by this new medium where the median is causing a line of sight problem for getting onto the road to turn left. So because all those things are unknowns, I think that it's
so I
hard.
keep going back to, again, the emails were wonderful, and thank you for sending all that information. That was very helpful. I go back to a conversation that we had with the state engineer, and when we were trying to rebuild Highway 5, and they're talking about all the safety features they want to put in, and there was one comment that just shot the whole thing to heck, and that was that, well, where do we want to put these little noisemakers in the middle to keep people from crossing it over? And his comment was, well, I'd put them everywhere on every road if I had the chance. And it's like, well, all right, there's always going to be something new that you find out from a study that, okay, let's go add it to every road. All right, the latest thing I'm hearing here is, yes, a median probably will help. And, all right, it's the latest new thing. I don't mean to belittle it, but that's kind of what I'm hearing. And, well, why do we have to do it now? And why do we have to start at County Road 11 in Victoria and build it out west that way? You're not going to go back and redo Pioneer Trail and make it match. So you got, it just doesn't seem to fit, especially when I start to listen to all of your comments about how it will detract from how the road needs to be used today. And so where I arrived at in conversation back and forth with Doug and with Kara was that the biggest safety concern from my perspective is the pedestrian and bicycle traffic. And so putting a median in at an intersection makes sense, but not where you need to drive implements down the road and stuff like that. And so maybe there's a compromise there that we look at a standard road section like on Pioneer Trail, but we have medians at the intersections to help people cross where we don't have today. And I don't know, that's just kind of where I'm at.
I think there's some
we're making
compromise
this
to
too
be
hard.
discussed, for sure.
Well, I also think that, you know, you've got some pretty significant grades, so you've got line of sight issues. I think those are gonna be taken care of in the final design, or at least minimize the curves and the hills. But I also think, is that the time when you're making those major grade changes to put in a tunnel, and instead of having pedestrian crossings at grade, give them an underpass. You've got some topography to work with there where that doesn't have to be like it was over here, digging out a huge chunk of the highway.
Well, for pedestrians crossing Marsh Lake Road, there's not really anywhere to go yet. So I don't know if on that road, that would definitely apply on
But if you're gonna
43.
do it, right?
So
But yeah.
here's the thing, everybody. From my perspective, it's a 50-year road. So we get one chance. We get one chance to do it right. We're not going to likely come back in 20 years and rip up whole sections and rebuild them. The County Road 11 median that we're talking about putting in at 86th Street is a $400,000 project we're trying to figure out how to fund that the county applied for grants for. So even though there isn't anything to the south right now, there will be in the next 50 years. So at least looking at those major intersections to see what some safe crossing opportunities would be and planning for it. What that looks like in construction, in final design, depends on whether, you know, you just have extra width there that you could convert to a median or
Well, and that's the
not,
problem
but-
that we've kind of faced today is that we have bike trail connections that nobody thought of 50 years ago, and we're trying to figure out how to connect those. We know now we need to connect those. And so for building south of Marsh Lake Road, there's got to be a way to get a bike across that in a safe manner, or a pedestrian, because in 10 years, it's going to be needed. And so to Tom's point, or Councilmember Striegel's point, you know, is it a tunnel? I don't know. But we need to think about those things. I'm just concerned of, I don't think we need a median in the middle all the way down the road, and that just makes it, we're making this too hard.
I think we need to, we owe it to the citizens of Victoria to give them a decent road right now. We also owe it to the citizens of Victoria to make sure that this makes sense 20, 30 years from now, or 40 years from now. And so the hard decision is to get both. And you should, you know, we shouldn't focus solely on the short term and solely on the long term. So I'm thinking some kind of negotiated solution is probably in order, because the safety thing looms big in my mind. I'm very familiar with the intersection issues in town here on County Road 11, where we've got to put a median in on 86th and Deer Run Drive, because that's the only solution to get safety for both pedestrians and people coming in and out of these side roads. And it's very expensive doing it now. It's like $450,000, and it would have been a lot cheaper just to have built the road that way. So to me, if I've read all these emails over the past many months, and I've heard that kids play near the road. I've heard that there will be, and believe it or not, there will be pedestrian traffic as soon as this thing is built out, and it won't take long before people are going to want to get across Marsh Lake Road on their bicycles and on foot. And so safety is an issue, and to just completely poo-poo it because it doesn't make sense to violate the farming end of the road. I think, the median thing has merit in certain places. And the ability to put a median in 30 years from now should be there. So the width, so the right-of-way should be there, and the whole thing should be structured so that in areas where we don't put a median in, we can do it. And it won't cost a fortune 20 years from now. So I think there's got to be some, I look at what's happening on Victoria Drive and Deer Run, it's turned into a safety issue because it's impossible to get these people to slow down. The median is because you cannot get these people to slow down. So the idea that you would just have some kind of 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is probably not realistic. I mean, we would like to have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit at Deer Run Drive and 86th Street and Victoria Drive, and it's not going to happen. So if you got people that who was saying they drove Pioneer Trail? I drive Pioneer Trail X number of times a week going into Chaska. Yeah, and nobody drives the speed limit. So it's basically you're not going to see the people slow down. So in order to get safety for everybody, and it's not just the pedestrians, if there are people coming out of their driveways, it's going to get harder and harder to get out and take a left turn. So I think that we basically we can't throw away the future just to satisfy the short term now. I think there's something here that we have to address on both ends.
Well, we're concerned with safety, number one, because if we are, in one breath, like you said, we're taking out the rises and falls and we're taking out the curves to make this, faster design standard. And by making it a faster design standard, you make it easier way to drive fast. So how do we undo some of that? What else can we do to undo that?
If it was built like Pioneer Trail is today, could a median be added on a road section that big in the future?
That's what I'm writing down here as follow-up question to the design engineer and the county. What does it look like if because you got to have the turn lanes at the intersection, so what does it look like if we have enough space in the middle that you could implement a median when it's appropriate, when, 25 years from now, so you've already got everything there, you're just coming in and building the median later. What's the impact of that on the design today?
And I think when we talk about, or at least DOT talks about reducing grades and straightening curves, they talk about it as safety, not to go faster necessarily, but to improve sight
Line of
lines
sight.
so you can see hazards before you're, overdriven them. But you're right, that the natural result is this is a great wide open road. I can go faster and I still feel safe. So,
And that's what we're afraid of. When we made the comparison over a year ago in our 3-year journey of why the heck do we want a 41-foot median at the end of Pioneer Trail that has no median, we wanted to make that comparison because a 41-foot median with a future third and fourth lane seemed absolutely insane, like that would never even be needed. What we didn't intend to do was to paint the picture like we want Pioneer Trail, because I think the problem with Pioneer Trail, like we've already said, is that it is at the extent of too open, to the point that even though it's posted at 45, you're going 60 down there and you don't even realize it. And that's why, we've mentioned multiple times these electronic radar solar-powered signs being permanently installed, because whenever we've had the temporary trailer one out there, it is amazing that everyone, with the very few exceptions of the turkeys that are not going to slow down regardless of how many times you flip them off, everyone else looks at it and immediately looks at their speedometer and slows down. And I know that the effect of that over time would probably wear off on some people, but because this is a residential area and will continue to be more and more residential, the truth of who speeds by my house when I sit out there drinking my coffee in the morning is minivan moms that are just not paying attention because they're starting their busy day, or individual driving fathers going to. Well, construction workers is another case because they don't pay attention either way. But those radar signs really do make a significant impact. So I don't know.
No, and I think the increasing levels of traffic that will come with the improved road will be an inherent. Won't that slow? Just because of the volume, people will have to slow down, right? Because of coming in.
When you look at, even if the road ends at County Road 11 and ends at 43, it's a significant collector, major east-west road that is in conflict with having residential driveways on it. And that is the inherent difference in perspective on what the right solution is there. You've got residential houses on what will become a more significant east-west corridor that creates this circle discussion about what is in their best interest versus what's in the best interest of the traveling public that need to move back and forth through the corridor. So we keep sort of ending up in the same place with the same list of advantages and disadvantages. And at the end of the day, we need to get the road improved. We've now lost another year in the construction season having the same discussion about divided or undivided. Thankfully, it's much narrower, so I'm happy we waited to get that 4-lane thing off the table, but we need to move ahead.
How many intersections are we looking at on Marsh Lake? Is it 3 or 4?
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 major.
So
and then
it's
probably
I'm
4 or
like you're
6.
Open to the idea of building medians at intersections and possibly east-west end, and then being able to fill them in later.
So from a process perspective, it's the county's, it's a future county road. So what I'm looking for out of tonight is direction from the city council that I can go back to the county and say, look, the residents, the city council do not support a median other than in these locations. And then the county's going to have to decide, are we comfortable with that? And if they say yes, then we can move forward with completing preliminary design.
You've got my vote.
Well, I mean, and ultimately, we haven't touched on the money, but if we don't build this to some county standard, they won't take the road over, or they won't contribute to the funding. And what's the bill if we just said, you know what, we're going our own way?
5?
It's closer to 10
The
million.
county has 10 million in their CIP for this project, but we can't get to an estimate.
Okay,
I'm
but
3 years in without an estimate, but yeah.
It's an order of magnitude number. And what's the cost share with county leading the effort?
So we can't even get to understanding what our share of that will be until we have a cost estimate, because their cost participation policy applies to different pieces of the work. So once we have that, we'll know. So we're like 2 months away from knowing all of those answers, but it's expensive, and I don't want to spend another $100,000 in engineering dollars on the county's preferred plan, because the city council is going to have to authorize final design. And if at that point in time the city council says, yeah, we don't want a median, then I don't want SRF spending $100,000 laying out a plan with a median that nobody's going to approve.
I think we need some medians. We need some part of that road with medians. That, to me, is absolutely, I just can't see not doing that.
Well, and that's where I arrived at, is through these conversations, is that the median, the place to put the median is where you have the pedestrians and the bike traffic crossing. It's at the intersections.
Well, at least 3 or 4 different places,
Right.
and not just little clumps of cement. I mean,
And then
these have to be safe.
East and West End as well.
Yeah.
So if we did that, and if we all agreed on that, and we present that to the county and say, what do you think? We want median at East and West End, and at each one of the intersections. and then we make it wide enough to fill in later.
Does it matter what kind of median you're talking about? Because, there's differences between a median like what we show on the picture that has a full curb and then dirt and grass and landscaping versus maybe an eased curb, or I'm sure that there's 15 different designs that they come up with.
The county did signal in discussion that they would be open to that kind of discussion about what the extent of median is. But the takeaway I'm hearing is significantly less median than more median, particularly. So at the east end, Councilmember Gregory, that's where the Schmiegs farm is. So we certainly wouldn't want to cut off their farm equipment from moving back and forth. But at the intersection of 11, we want to have, where we're proposing a roundabout, we want to have safe crossings coming in and out of there. The west end is an interesting thing to talk about because the west end, the proposed road is running through the meat cutters land that is currently under contract for development. So on that section, it might be easier to implement a median through that part. But again, the residents want us to continue to be cognizant of how the farming equipment moves, because it moves all the way from 43 to 11.
And on that point, if there's a curb on the outer edges, regardless of what the median looks like, does that kind of make the whole conversation moot? Because you want to approach?
Yeah, Scott. He signed up.
So, Scott Stensland, 5760 Marsh Lake Road. Redo from getting the hook earlier. But a couple thoughts, and I'm coming out of order now, but I wish I could have addressed, I have a thought on the medians. And I know when we met with Karen last time, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think she was a little surprised by how much agricultural use is on Marsh Lake right now. And I absolutely understand your concerns for designing a road for 20 years. But we have to consider that we could have a lot of agricultural traffic for 20 years, 15 years probably for sure. So I think when most people think of ag out there, they think of the Schmieg Hilltop Farm. Like Jeremy just said, kind of that eastern 1/3 of Marsh Lake Road. They have land on both sides of the road. In fact, there's 3 more families that farm adjacent land on Marsh Lake Road. We've got the Schmiegs, we've got the Keltzers, we have the Hess Farm, and we have Stefan Wenzel. What's interesting is there's a lot of farming that's done at Marsh Lake Hunt Club. Marsh Lake Hunt Club is exactly in the middle of Marsh Lake Road. Yearly, the Schmieg family, in addition to their own farming, they cut 25 acres of hay back in the Hunt Club, 3 times a year. Hess family cuts 15 to 20 acres of hay back at the Hunt Club yearly, in addition to the Schmiegs. Stefan Wenzel farms all the corn, 40 acres. Stefan Wenzel's coming from the west side all the way up Marsh Lake Road. Hess is coming up all the way on the west side, and the Schmiegs are coming from the east side. Let's just think about that equipment. Combine, 25 feet across. The wheels are 16 feet. That's wider than the length of my car. Combine. Tractor connected to a baler, connected to a wagon. 60 feet. It's amazing to me that these amazing farmers can even drive those in the best conditions. How can they do it with the median? I don't think it's safe. I think the benefit of not having a median is they can hug a shoulder and they can allow for cars to pass. When we put a median in, we essentially lock them in place. And we lock the cars behind them in place. I think you're really creating you're kind of fostering a situation for really poor decisions by drivers. I have no doubt they're going to try and pass those cars. That's just not safe.
What's the volume of these trips?
Well, cutting hay is usually 3 times a year. The combine, corn is once a year.
Total volume of all these people.
Yeah,
how many times a year are we going to have equipment on the road?
You have 4 different farmers that are on these roads 3 to 4 times a year. And there's little pockets, yes, that are going to disappear along Marsh Lake Road. But the Hunt Club's going to be back there for 15 years. That's not going anywhere, and it's going to be farmed. I don't think it's safe, and I think this equipment, not no fault of the farmers, it's going to trash. We're going to have upkeep to keep these medians in place. I mean, it really, to me, it doesn't work. It's kind of this can't happen. It's Marsh Lake Road. Marsh Lake Road is, I mean, it's changing. There's no doubt. But it's really anchored in agriculture.
So Scott, if we look at the section that's up here right now, and Kara, can you move to get the whole thing? And so I heard before 3 or 4 intersections. So you've got the east end there on 43. You've got this one with Wasserman Court.
Absolutely.
Probably one right
The next
Yeah, it's gonna be.
Right there.
Yep.
And then down at
one here.
right here.
Kind of where the new,
Right
where we
here.
talked about the sewer earlier.
Yep.
Yep, all
And then
those.
at the end. And so having just those there at the intersections, does that pose as big a problem or just as big a problem or?
You know, I think it does.
Okay.
I mean, I think the amount of land is going to be taken. And I know Kara's going to follow up on, can we, I mean, at some point, yes, we have probably going to have to refit, center medians there. But the other thing to consider, when we're, talking about crossings and things, please don't forget, Marsh Lake Road is essentially, it's a dead end. I mean, it doesn't go any further than 43. Marsh Lake Road, it's not comparing apples to apples to compare it to 86th Street, to Pioneer. It's just not ever going to have that sort of traffic. It's not.
Well, and that's where the county would beg to differ when they say they extend Marsh Lake Road to connect up there, but we have no plan to do that.
Well, in my opinion, they've said they're not. They've said we're not going to bring it across that wetland. Sure, we're going to have a cloverleaf that goes up to Airport, but what did they just do with Airport Road? They just black tarred that for $2 million.
Yeah.
I'll say this would never happen in a million years, but I'll throw it out there. Marsh Lake Road is a very unique road, and it wasn't all. It was probably just thrown on the ground 100 years ago. Marsh Lake Road, let's forget about the gravel. We can't have gravel. But it's I call it kind of self-regulating. It really regulates itself. It has some curves, it has some hills. Sure, some people speed. But think about it right now. We've got buses, we got tractors, we got farm equipment, we got lots of new people out there. We all get along. We don't have any accidents on Marsh Lake Road. It in its current design does a pretty good job. And I would bet if you just blacktopped it, I know it won't happen. It would serve us well for 15 years.
Here's the part that I worry about a little bit, and and I'm not saying that's the wrong answer. Smarter people than me will make those decisions, but the thing that I worry about is as soon as Creekview Drive connects up to Marsh Lake Road, and our new section of road that was surcharged for a year or so is connected, and these lots build out, that is going to be the path of least resistance to people coming into the elementary school and all of these hundreds of home sites getting out to 11 or 43.
And by the way,
so,
that is connected now.
It's connected.
It is.
All right.
That was in my original talk, so I was going to thank you because I know it hasn't even been open a week. That Lakeside Drive, without a doubt, has already made a difference.
Yeah.
A bunch of us have been driving it. We see those same cars that used to be on Marsh Lake Road. They're there. You're going to get lots of calls real soon. By the way.
Calls of thanks or of...
No, from all the people that are already up there and they didn't realize the Indianapolis 500 was coming through. It's going to happen.
So, and to that point, again, once Creekview connects and it becomes the path of least resistance, I just think the level of traffic on Marsh Lake Road is going to rise
Absolutely.
pretty dramatically.
It will. But still, overall, when you look out, and being a member of the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, you look at the build-out on Marsh Lake Road, most of it's still on the ends. You look at the Hunt Club, let's jump 15 years ahead. Hunt Club's build out. That's low density. That's not going to be high density. I just, when you think about 82nd Street or 86th Street and you see all the density along those roads, we tend to get grouped into that. It's not.
Maybe in 50 years, but not now.
Well, and that's the other, in 50 years, I totally appreciate trying to design a road for 50 years, but none of us can stand here and say it's possible to design a road for 50 years. Mm-hmm. It's just impossible. Right. To think that our kids, grandkids, are even going to know what a steering wheel is They aren't. Just like my kids don't know what a roll-up window is. Cars, it's going to be self-driving. They aren't going to be able to hit each other. They aren't going to hit pedestrians. I would argue the roads are going to get smaller.
Is there, and I know what I'm about to say may be absurd. I'll just put that out there in the beginning. But I'm looking at this aerial and all of the hay cutting and stuff, and I'm wondering, if we spent our money slightly differently, if we helped create some sort of an access road that allows the hay and the whatever to move back and forth, but staying all on one side of Marsh Lake Road, does that have any, for everybody?
Sure, right.
Right.
Good question.
Get the traffic, the heavy, wear-inducing vehicles off the road, the things that create, headaches for the people trying to make a living farming, for the people trying to make a living getting to and from the office. Is there anything that says, if we had some ability to move in parallel to the road without actually occupying?
I see smoke coming from Kara's ears because she's just moving.
We just moved.
I agree.
In my head, I was like, okay, 2021.
You just moved us 2 or 3 years.
We got a few more years.
Yeah,
but you know what? Absurd. Somebody said it earlier, though, and I couldn't agree more. We're making it complicated, and I guess that's why I made my comment about how it exists now. That road, I know there's going to be more, but it really does serve us, aside from gravel, it does serve us real well. And I get it. It's whether it's who's going to pay for it, but I think we're just overcomplicating all this. Really, I do agree with Jeremy. When I bicycle and ride on that road every single day. And I thank you. I meant to say this earlier. I really thank you for, I know they were temporary, the 35-mile-an-hour signs, but they made an impact. And they especially make an impact when that sign is up there and it flashes 40 miles an hour. People they absolutely hit the brake. Now, they might speed up again, but it does work. And if we can just build it smaller and at least try to reduce the speed, we can have a real safe road there, and we can still all get along because it's a really agricultural area, and that's part of the reason we're all living there.
So what do we do?
Well, I heard Kara say earlier that the county was open to some limited or minimal amount of median or a conversation about how that works.
So they expressed being open to the idea of breaks in the median or where access locations are. I think if the council's perspective is that it should be a 2-lane undivided road, we should say that, and we should go back to the county and see what they say in response to that. They haven't been pressed to have to answer that question, and I would want to see how they reacted to it. So that's sort of two extremes of the spectrum, to no median, to them saying, yeah, we'd be open to breaks in the median, to some minimal amount of median. I don't know how they'd react to the minimal amount of median compared to breaks.
So following up on that, now, if you have medians at each end, and we know one side's going to have a bike trail on it all the way along there, and now go look at other cities that have built out. I moved here in 2006 from Apple Valley, and when I moved to Apple Valley, the area we were at, it was farmland to Farmington, and when I left, it was all built out, like what we have right here. And they have bike paths all along every one of the roads, and your crossing point is at the intersection at the end of each block. And there isn't anything in the middle, there's no median in the highway, and that works really, really well. And it seems to be pretty safe. And so if you take that urban concept here, and you start off with a 2-lane highway, and you've got medians at each end, you got a bike path along, and maybe there's a median in the middle where one of those roads are, and you get the minimalist effect of the medians. Maybe that's a happy median.
Ba-dum-bum.
Just couldn't help it.
It's getting late. It's getting late.
Yeah.
Kara, do we have to give some, thank you. Do we have to give some feedback to the county as a result of this meeting?
That's my intent, is to say I met with the residents, I met with the council, the residents what I've heard is that the majority of the residents are opposed to a median anywhere along the corridor. So that's what I would likely be conveying. And then hearing whatever the council feedback is to then get the county's reaction to where the city's at.
Can I just add a couple other little thoughts? I'm Jen Mulvihill. I live at 5720 Marsh Lake Road. So I just have a couple little thoughts as we're going along here. So, Councilmember Vogt, you said we can't throw away the future to satisfy the now. And the reality is that there are many families that live on Marsh Lake Road, and we are not selling and developing our property. We will be here for the future. And so we are the future of Victoria. We have young children. We plan on staying here and raising our families. I know a lot of these other families who live here have young children and do not intend to sell and develop our land. So as you guys are making the plan for 20 years, like, plan on the Mulvihills and our land being there. And because, I mean, the reality is that this is a residential section of your city. So I'm not sure how familiar you guys are, how much you're out there, but we are a lot of families out here. And so we are the future. And so you're not sacrificing the future you're not sacrificing now for the future, because that's what we are, and that's what it's going to be. The other thing is I've been driving all these county roads, and I have spent so much time in the minivan with the kids and the tape measure, and there is no county road built out with a median like this. I can't find one. Kara has no examples of them. So if we have examples of them, it'd be great to see them, but I can't find one. I don't know of one, and we've asked numerous times. So I think we are like pioneering the county's designs that they want to do. I'm not sure what it is, but I don't want to be their guinea pig. I don't want to be the county's guinea pig for their oversized plan. I mean, during the day, granted we are getting more traffic, I could have a picnic in the middle of the road. There's nobody there. And traffic will expand, but it just seems like an overreach. And then Pioneer, over by the golf course in Chaska, like the very narrowest, the roadway's 45 feet. Just to throw it out there, the roadway's 45 feet. But yeah.
It's still pretty wide.
It's huge.
Well,
it's a huge road.
Yeah, and that right of way of 120 feet includes trail on one side and easement for a trail on the other side, which probably goes, another 20 feet?
The trail, it only includes trail on one side, but there's clear zone for snow storage, areas for utilities, a place for me to slide our sewer and water in that we need to run along that road.
Yeah, the other piece that hasn't been brought up,
Please.
I'm her husband.
Yeah, this is Josh.
I'm Josh. I also live at 5720. The other piece, no median, potentially makes the road 10 feet narrower, which potentially saves. We have a lot of big trees on Marsh Lake Road, and
so beautiful.
We would love that aesthetic rather than putting a potential median with little trees. We'd love to keep our big trees, and no guarantee that 10 feet keeps some of those, but it very well could. And we would much rather that aesthetic present as well.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
So that's all we got. We just wanted to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So essentially, I'd be taking the feedback that I get, conveying it to the county. The county will react, and then we'll see what happens next.
What do you think their reaction will be?
Linden has said often that what locals' priorities matter, and because the traffic volumes aren't there, I think there's the potential that they would not take their money and leave if the median is off the table.
I mean, one of the biggest changes that I've seen since this whole thing began is it started out with the traffic volumes are expected to be X, and they're nowhere near that. The latest information shows that it's like a third of what people were talking about a year ago. So to me, you can't argue with that the traffic doesn't appear to be there or will be there. I mean, if you went to the county and said the council's consensus based on feedback from the citizens was that limited use of medians only, What, I mean, that's what it's playing back to me.
That's what I hear.
Limited
That's what I
use of
feel.
medians.
Well, and I'd like to have you ask the county a question too, very much to your point. There are no other roads like this, what you're proposing anywhere in our county. Why here?
So Waconia, they're starting to build them in Waconia. Angler has a median. The reason why I couldn't come up with an applicable example is because they're all slightly different. So like the
Yeah,
one on,
Angler's a major highway.
correct, but they have a median on it, a landscaped median. That one's narrower than what we're talking about here. So none of them are quite right in terms of being applications. But I mean, if that's the feedback from the council, I think I should pick up the phone and call Linden tomorrow and say this is where we're at and see what happens next.
I would support that, and I would also remind that part of this happened when the fundamental vision for Pioneer Trail changed when those two roundabouts went in on Bavaria Road. And it no longer became a major east-west connector. And therefore, the 20,000 became 6,000.
Yeah.
And that's kind of forever, right? That whole corner is built out now with row homes and carriage homes. So it's not coming back.
The other part that I would convey would be the notion of we don't put a median in now, but we have space for a median. So when development occurs to the south or intersections start getting built, that we would have the ability to add the median at some point down the road.
Perfect, yes.
When it became necessary. That
Perfect.
was the other thing I
Ability
wrote
to put
down.
them in.
Yeah.
And what that might look like and mean.
I would support that conversation. If that's what you need from us as a nod, that that's the right way to go, I'm nodding.
Everybody nod?
I think we're nodding. And the ability to put them in 20 years from now, 30 years from now. But
At
very
lesser
limited.
cost than having to rebuild half the road like we have to on a
Right, and make sure all the right-of-way is there and the property's there for a good system.
So the minutes will show you're all nodding.
Yeah, all nodding.
Let the minutes show. It was vigorous nod.
Yeah, this wasn't, we aren't at a point in the process where we need council action. We will need council action down the road to authorize final design, but we'll have 2 new council members by then, so.
Part of what's happening.
Laughing that we can start all over again.
Part of what's happening
Take
here
good
is,
notes. You have to educate them.
you people are very articulate and you've done your homework. So what can we do when people are articulate and they've done their homework? React to you.
And an important aspect of that to me is that a lot of times these decisions affect property values, for better or worse. And in some case, if you want to be the guy who's selling to the developer, your property value went down because of some of the decision, but you guys are the property owners and you're making those decisions for yourself. And I think to me, that's appropriate.
So I think that's the end of this discussion.
It is.
And we have,
Thank you all.
thank you.
Thank you.
What's next?
We're to the reports from the city manager.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the one question I have for you on that is that you scheduled a workshop with the League of Minnesota's Insurance Trust for the 24th of September. We're going to have a short meeting starting at 5:30, and hopefully we will be adjourning that meeting at 6 and go into the workshop. The workshop will be open to the public, simply the same as your workshops always are. But the question is, should we record that and have a live feed on that workshop? The presenter of that, the attorney that's going to be working with us for the League of Cities, is suggesting that she thinks she can do a better job. It was not on camera and recorded. People will speak more freely and maybe we make more progress toward what she wants to accomplish. So the question to you is, where are you on that issue?
I would prefer that there be a archival recording of the event. Doesn't necessarily have to be live.
Can it be considered like a closed session, I think is what you're suggesting?
Well, not necessarily even a closed session, just that,
Just have accurate minutes.
I want a video.
Oh, I'd be fine with
I'd
that.
like to have a
Minimum
video
audio.
or audio recording
I,
for archival purposes. I see what you mean by treating it as a closed session. There is a recording available after the fact.
very, very good.
An audio, video, or both?
I would say audio.
Audio's
The
sufficient.
meeting's gonna be open to the public, you understand that? Somebody can sit here.
Yes.
Correct.
Just
Will they
record
be able to record it sitting there?
I think
No, will someone just be able to record it anyway?
yes. So you can record it if you want to, but we would not.
I don't think it needs to be streamed live or
The
anything.
problem with that, let me think about it. If somebody requested that recording the next day, where are we at?
Well, if the city elects to video record or audio record, that would be public data. So the city does that. Now, if somebody in the audience records it surreptitiously or overtly, that's not obviously subject to the Data Practices Act.
What is did the league attorney or coordinator, whatever, distinguish between video and audio recordings?
Did not ask that question. She simply said if it were not on camera, people might tend to speak more freely.
Then just audio recorded. Because my concern is the session that we had before Christmas that was supposed to be audio recorded and it didn't get recorded. Now we've got people saying things that didn't happen there. And so to have the actual recording, I think, is in our favor.
Let's audio
Yes.
record it. That's my.
Okay, understanding that it's public information, and if somebody requests it, we would give it out.
Certainly.
But we
Yeah.
must make sure that the audio recording is working.
I'm relying on my boys back there. I know they can do it.
So,
Okay, that's good. That's all the direction I need on that. We included in the correspondence a letter from the Housing First, which simply said that we're one of 25 cities in the state of Minnesota that they may want to talk about whether our housing developments fees do something like the fees that the Supreme Court has just overturned in
Woodbury.
Woodbury. I'm simply going to respond to them. I don't think any of our fees do, and we'll see where they go, because I'm pretty sure they don't. At Karen, I've talked about that. We don't think we have any of the types of fees that were overturned, so we don't have to do anything on that. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Pro Tem.
Does the city attorney have anything to report?
You know, Acting Mayor, I was going to very briefly report on, you're aware of a data request for some data involving the mayor. I was going to really briefly report on that, but I think I'd prefer to report on that when the mayor's here in case there's questions or feedback on that. The other issue that I was going to report on is what Doug just brought up, which is Doug and I talked about the recording issue today, and I posed the question about whether I should be present at the workshop. What are we calling it? Workshop meeting involving the league attorney, and so we decided that I should reach out to her. She asked that I do be there, and I'm obviously happy to be there, so I'm going to plan to be there, but I want you to understand that I was ambivalent about whether I should or shouldn't. It's she that wants me to be there, so I'm
I think that's a good thing.
And I'm planning on being there, and there will not, she suggested no other staff, so just so you know, that's,
Who will be facilitating the meeting? She will?
yes.
Okay.
And she will be meeting with each one of you as we are scheduled beforehand. She's going to meet with staff to get that perspective. And then from that, she puts together what she thinks will work.
And that's all I have.
Councilmember Gregory, any report?
No report, sir.
I have no report.
No report.
That makes 4.
Okay.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
He likes that.
Yeah.
Did you ever get a reply? Ever get a reply? From
No.
Mayor Funk?
I